My name is Nellie, and for as long as I can remember, I'd been the afterthought in my family. Growing up, it was always about my younger sister, Emma, the golden child, the shining star, the one who could do no wrong. Emma was the daughter my parents had always dreamed of having. Me? I was the awkward one, the bookworm, the girl who'd rather solve math problems than socialize at parties. Don't get me wrong, I loved learning and was good at it, but in a family that valued charm over intellect, I might as well have been invisible. I remember one particular day when I was 12 and Emma was 10. We were at a family barbecue, and I had just won a regional spelling bee. I was bursting to share the news with anyone who'd listen. Mom, Dad, guess what? I ran up to them, certificate in hand. I won the spelling bee. My mother glanced at me, her eyes quickly darting back to Emma, who was doing cartwheels on the lawn. That's nice, dear, she said distractedly. Emma, sweetie, be careful. You might get grass stains on your new dress. I stood there, certificate crumpled in my fist, watching as relatives cooed over Emma's athletic prowess. No one asked about my achievement. No one cared. Our parents' favoritism wasn't subtle. Emma got new clothes, I got hand-me-downs. Emma got dance lessons, I got library cards. Emma got praise and attention, I got used to disappointment. As we grew older, the pattern continued. Emma blossomed into a beautiful teenager, popular and vivacious. I retreated further into my books and numbers, finding solace in the worlds where merit mattered more than charm. Nellie, why can't you be more like your sister? Became a common refrain in our household. It was usually followed by, Emma, darling, you're perfect just the way you are. I tried not to let it bother me. I told myself that one day, my hard work and intelligence would pay off. One day, I'd show them all that I was worth something too. As I entered high school, I threw myself into my studies with renewed vigor. I was determined to excel, to make achievements so impressive that even my parents couldn't ignore them. But as it turned out, I was fighting a losing battle against the golden glow of Emma's popularity. In my junior year, I reached what I thought would be the pinnacle of my academic career. I won the state math competition. It was a grueling contest, pitting the brightest minds against each other in a battle of numbers and logic. When they announced my name as the winner, I felt a surge of pride and hope. Finally, I thought, I've done something truly extraordinary. I rushed home that day, trophy in hand, eager to share the news with my family. But as I burst through the door, I was met with the usual scene, my parents hovering around Emma, who was trying on a new costume. Mom, Dad, guess what? I said, breathless with excitement. I won the state math competition. My mother glanced up, a distracted smile on her face. Oh, that's nice, dear. Emma, honey, turn around. Let's see how it looks from the back. My father didn't even look up from adjusting Emma's costume. Good job, Nellie. Emma, are you sure this is the right size? It seems a bit tight around the shoulders. I stood there, trophy in hand, feeling utterly deflated. But, it's the state competition. I beat out hundreds of other students. That's great, sweetie, my mother said, not really listening. Emma has a big performance this weekend. We need to make sure everything's perfect. And just like that, my moment of triumph was overshadowed once again by Emma's latest endeavor. I retreated to my room, placing the trophy on my desk where it gathered dust, unnoticed by anyone but me. When it came time for college applications, I poured my heart and soul into every essay, every form. I was determined to get into the best school possible, to prove once and for all that I was worth something. The day the acceptance letters arrived was one I'll never forget. I'd been accepted to a prestigious university with a full scholarship to study financial analysis. My hand shook as I read the letter, tears of joy and relief streaming down my face. I found my parents in the living room, Emma sprawled across the couch between them. I got in, I said, my voice trembling with emotion. Full scholarship to study financial analysis at. Oh my God, Emma suddenly shrieked, jumping up from the couch. I forgot. I need a new costume for my performance next week. And just like that, the spotlight shifted. My parents leaped into action, grabbing their keys and wallets. I stood in the empty living room, acceptance letter clutched in my hand, listening to the sound of the car pulling out of the driveway. They didn't come back until late that night, arms laden with bags full of Emma's new costume and accessories. My acceptance? It was never mentioned again. As I threw myself into my studies at university, Emma's life took a different turn. She enrolled in the local community college, more focused on her social life than her academic pursuits. It wasn't long before she started dating John, her high school sweetheart. I immersed myself in the world of financial analytics, finding a sense of purpose and validation I'd never experienced before. For once, my intelligence and work ethic were recognized and appreciated. I made a few close friends who shared my passion for numbers and analysis. It felt like I was finally where I belonged. Meanwhile, back home, Emma's life was progressing exactly as our parents had always dreamed. She married John right after graduating from college, in a lavish ceremony that my parents spared no expense for. I stood by as a bridesmaid, feeling like an outsider in my own family once again. Within a year of their marriage, Emma announced she was pregnant. The day she gave birth to Lily, you'd have thought the sun rose and set on that delivery room. My parents were beside themselves with joy. "We're grandparents," my father kept saying, his eyes misty with tears. "Can you believe it, Nellie? Aren't you excited to be an aunt?" I was happy for Emma, truly. But I couldn't help but feel the sting of being overlooked yet again. I had just landed a job at one of the most prestigious financial firms in the city, but in the face of Emma's new motherhood, it seemed insignificant. When Anthony was born 2 years later, the cycle repeated. Emma was the perfect daughter with the perfect family, and I was just Nellie. The one who worked too much, who didn't date enough, who didn't give them grandchildren to dote on. By the time I turned 30, I had worked my way up to senior financial analyst. I was respected by my peers, sought after by clients, and finally feeling a sense of self-worth that had eluded me for so long. To celebrate my success, I decided to buy myself a house. It was a beautiful 4-bedroom home in a great neighborhood. It wasn't a mansion by any means, but it was mine, bought with my own hard-earned money. The day I got the keys, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment that I'd never experienced before. Excitedly, I invited my family over to see my new home. I thought, finally, they'd see what I'd achieved, that they'd be proud of me. They arrived, Emma with her kids in tow, my parents cooing over their grandchildren. As I gave them a tour of the house, my mother's main comment was, "It's such a big house for just one person, isn't it?" I felt my heart sink. "It's an investment," I tried to explain. "And I have room for a home office now." "Well, I suppose that's sensible," my father said, but his tone suggested he found it anything but. "Emma, honey, make sure Lily doesn't touch anything. We don't want to break Aunt Nellie's things." As they left, I overheard my mother saying to Emma, "It's a shame Nellie doesn't have a family to fill that big house. But I suppose her career is important to her." A few months after I'd settled into my new home, I received an unexpected invitation to a family dinner. I was surprised, to say the least. My family often forgot to include me in gatherings, dismissing me as strange and uninteresting. Nevertheless, I accepted, hoping that perhaps things were changing. "Nellie, good of you to come," my father said, patting my shoulder awkwardly. "Have a seat. We have something important to discuss." A knot formed in my stomach. Important discussions in this family usually meant something good for Emma, and something disappointing for me. Still, I sat down, forcing a smile. We ate dinner, the conversation revolving around Emma's kids and John's job. I tried to mention a successful project I'd just completed at work, but my words were drowned out by Anthony's sudden wail for more dessert. After dinner, as we settled in the living room, my mother cleared her throat. "Nellie, dear, we've been thinking." I braced myself, unsure of what was coming. "You're single, with no children," she continued, her tone suggesting this was some kind of terminal illness. And you have that big house all to yourself. Yes, I said slowly, not liking where this was going. My father jumped in. Well, we think it would be best if you gave your house to Emma and her family. I blinked, certain I had misheard. I'm sorry, what? Give them the keys and move out, my mother clarified, as if she was asking me to pass the salt. They need the space more than you do. I looked around the room, waiting for someone to laugh, to say it was all a joke. But all I saw were serious faces. Emma sat looking smug, while John patted her shoulder condescendingly. You're joking, right? I finally managed to say. Now, Nellie, my mother said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone I knew so well. Don't be selfish. Emma needs her own space more than you do. You're just one person, after all. It's your sisterly duty, my father added, as if that settled everything. Family helps family. I felt like I was in some kind of twisted alternate reality. But, it's my house, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I bought it with my own money. I worked hard for it. Oh, come on, Nellie, Emma chimed in, her voice sickly sweet. You know how hard it is raising 2 kids in our small apartment. You'd be doing us such a favor. I stood up, my hands shaking. No, I said, my voice growing stronger. Absolutely not. I'm not giving you my house. The room erupted. My parents started listing all the sacrifices they'd supposedly made for me over the years. Emma went on about the difficulties of raising children. John sat there, nodding along as if this whole scenario was perfectly reasonable. As I walked out, I heard my mother call after me, think about it, Nellie. Don't be selfish. In the days following that surreal dinner, my life turned into a circus of unwanted attention. It seemed my parents had spread the tale of my selfishness far and wide among our extended family. Suddenly, relatives I hadn't spoken to in years became experts on my life, bombarding me with calls and messages. One afternoon, I picked up a call from my great-aunt Mildred, a woman I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. Nellie, she croaked into the phone, I heard about your situation. How could you be so heartless? You're nothing but an old maid saving money for no good reason. The next day, my cousin Mike, whom I barely knew, sent me a text. Hey Nellie, heard you're being difficult. Why don't you just move to a remote island and live as a hermit? You're already an outcast and a loner anyway. 2 weeks after the disastrous family dinner, I found myself at home, nursing a bad cold. As I sat on my couch, wrapped in a blanket and sipping hot tea, I heard an odd noise coming from my front door. A distinct sound of someone fumbling with the lock. My heart began to race. Was someone trying to break in? I set my tea down quietly and crept towards the door, my legs shaking beneath me. Pressing my eye to the peephole, I nearly gasped out loud. There, on my front porch, were my sister, my parents, and John. Emma was kneeling by the lock, a hairpin in her hand, while my parents kept watch. John stood a little way back, looking nervous. Without thinking, I yanked the door open. They all jumped back, startled expressions on their faces. What the hell do you think you're doing? I demanded, my voice hoarse from my cold but filled with anger. For a moment, they all stared at me, caught red-handed. Then, to my utter disbelief, my mother spoke up. We thought you'd be at work. We were just going to move in. Move in? I repeated, incredulous. You mean break in and squat in my house? Now, Nellie, my father interjected. We knew you wouldn't have called the police on us. We're family, after all. I looked past them and saw a car parked in my driveway, loaded with boxes and suitcases. They had actually planned to move in behind my back. Get off my property, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Now, or I will call the police. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, holding it up so they could see. Last chance, I said. Leave now. They stared at me for a long moment, disbelief written across their faces. Then, slowly, they began to retreat. I watched them drive away, my whole body shaking. Once they were out of sight, I closed the door, locked it, and slid down to the floor, my back against the solid wood. The very next day, I contacted a security company and had surveillance cameras installed around the perimeter of my property. These weren't just any cameras, they came with a voice recording function. But technology alone wasn't enough. I'd always wanted a dog, and now I had the perfect reason to get one. I headed to the local animal shelter, determined to find a companion who could also serve as a guardian. That's where I met Max. He was a large, mixed-breed dog with intelligent eyes and a wary demeanor. The shelter worker told me his story. He'd been abandoned by his previous owners for being too protective. I saw past his gruff exterior to the loyal, loving dog underneath. Max and I bonded quickly. At home, he was gentle and affectionate, always by my side. But when strangers approached the house, he transformed into a vigilant guardian, his deep bark a warning to anyone who might think of trespassing. I set up a beautiful kennel in the backyard for Max, complete with a cozy doghouse and plenty of toys. He seemed to love it, often lounging in the sun-dappled grass when he wasn't patrolling the perimeter. For 2 months, life was peaceful. But a work emergency called me out of town for a weekend. I was reluctant to leave, but my neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, assured me she'd take good care of Max. She adored him, often bringing him treats and taking him for walks when I worked late. I left feeling relatively at ease. But on the second night of my trip, my phone rang. It was Mrs. Johnson, and she sounded frantic. "Nellie, dear, there's been an incident," she said, her voice shaking. "Max, he bit the stranger. Chased them right out of the yard and down the street. The police are here now." I caught the first flight back, my mind whirling with possibilities. When I arrived home, I was met with a scene straight out of my nightmares. My parents' car was parked in front of my house. Emma was there, looking both angry and smug. And to my horror, there were 2 police officers standing in my driveway. I approached cautiously. "What's going on here?" One of the officers stepped forward. "Ma'am, we've had a complaint about your dog attacking someone. Can you tell us what happened?" Before I could respond, Emma cut in. "Her monster of a dog attacked my husband. Jumped right over the fence and bit him. He could have been killed." Suddenly, everything clicked into place. The bite, it had been John. "That's not true," I said firmly. "My dog was protecting my property from intruders. If your husband was bitten, it's because he was trying to break into my house." Emma's face turned an ugly shade of red. "Liar! Put that beast down before it hurts someone else." My parents, who had been oddly quiet, now chimed in. "We'll be pressing charges," my father said, a gleam in his eye. "You'll have to pay for John's medical bills, of course." The officer looked between us, clearly sensing the family tension. "Ma'am, due to the complaint, we're going to have to take your dog to the kennel for evaluation. If he's deemed aggressive, he may have to be put down." My heart sank as I watched animal control load Max into their van. He looked at me with confused, sad eyes, and I felt tears well up in my own. As the officers and animal control drove away, my mother approached me. In a low voice, she said, "You know, Nellie, all of this could have been avoided if you'd just given us the house. It's not too late. Give us the house, and we'll drop the charges. Otherwise, well, you know what happens to aggressive dogs." As I stood in my driveway, watching my family drive away with smug satisfaction, a sudden realization hit me like a bolt of lightning. The security cameras. I rushed into the house, my heart pounding in my chest. My hands shook as I booted up my laptop and accessed the security footage from the previous night. As the video began to play, I held my breath, praying that the cameras had captured what I needed. The footage was crystal clear. I watched as Emma and John crept up to my front door, looking furtively over their shoulders. Max appeared on screen, his hackles raised, a low growl emanating from his throat. Then, I heard Emma's voice, clear as day. "John, kick the dog. When it bites you, we can accuse Nellie and demand compensation. Or better yet, We can get the whole house in exchange for the dog's life." I felt sick to my stomach as I watched John cruelly kick Max. The dog, surprised by the sudden attack, latched onto John's leg in self-defense. Emma let out an ear-piercing scream, causing Max to release his grip immediately. The two of them ran away, leaving Max looking confused and distressed. The next morning, I called my parents. Keeping my voice steady, I said, "I think we need to have a serious conversation. Can you all come over to my house?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then, my mother's voice, sickly sweet, "Of course, dear. We'll be right over." An hour later, they all arrived, my parents, Emma, and John, his leg conspicuously bandaged. As they filed into my living room, I could see the triumph in their eyes. They thought they had won. Emma immediately began to wander around the room, pointing at various items. "We'll need to get rid of this ugly lamp," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "And this couch simply won't do. We'll replace it with something more family-friendly." I bit my tongue, letting her continue her presumptuous tour of my home. Finally, I cleared my throat. "Before we discuss anything," I said, my voice calm despite the anger boiling inside me, "I think you should watch something." I gestured towards the large TV mounted on the wall. "Please, have a seat. All of you." Confusion flickered across their faces, but they complied, settling onto the couch. Emma perched on the armrest, a look of irritation on her face. As the security footage played on the screen, I watched the color drain from my family's faces. Their expressions morphed from confusion to shock, and finally to horror as they realized their scheme had been caught on camera. Emma was the first to break the stunned silence. It was just a prank," she sputtered, her voice shrill with panic. "We didn't mean any harm." John nodded vigorously, wincing as the movement jostled his injured leg. "Yeah, just a joke that got out of hand. No need to make a big deal out of this, right?" My parents, however, seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation. My father leaned forward, his face ashen. "Nellie, sweetheart, let's not be hasty. There's no need to make this public. We can work this out as a family." I couldn't help but smile, a cold, humorless expression that made them all flinch. "It's a bit late for that, don't you think?" I said, glancing at my watch. "And speaking of late, I believe we have some guests arriving." As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to reveal two police officers, whom I had called earlier that morning. "Perfect timing," I said, ushering them in. "Officers, I have evidence of an attempted break-in and a malicious attempt at blackmail." What followed was a flurry of activity. I explained the situation to the police, showing them the damning security footage. They listened gravely, then moved to detain Emma and John. As the officers read them their rights, my parents broke down in tears. "Nellie, please," my mother sobbed. "Don't do this. We're family." I felt a twinge of sadness, but it was quickly overshadowed by years of pent-up hurt and resentment. "You should have thought of that before you tried to steal my home and hurt my dog," I said coldly. "I think it's time for you to leave." They left in tears, following behind as Emma and John were escorted to the police cruiser. That evening, with a weight lifted off my shoulders, I went to the animal shelter to bring Max home. He was overjoyed to see me, his tail wagging furiously as he covered my face with kisses. "Let's go home, buddy," I whispered, hugging him tightly. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Emma and John were arrested and stood trial. With the clear evidence from my security cameras, they were found guilty of attempted breaking and entering, as well as attempted blackmail. They were slapped with a hefty fine, which was awarded to me, and given suspended sentences. I made the decision to cut off all communication with my immediate family. However, I felt it was important that the rest of the family knew the truth. I sent a detailed account of what had transpired, along with copies of the security footage, to all our extended relatives. The response was overwhelming. Aunts, uncles, and cousins who had once berated me for my selfishness now sent messages of support and apology. My parents, Emma and John found themselves ostracized from family gatherings, their actions deemed unforgivable by even the most forgiving relatives. As for me, life took a turn for the better. I continued to excel at my job, finding more satisfaction in my work than ever before. Max and I settled into a comfortable routine, enjoying long walks in the park near our home. It was on one of these walks that I met Greg, a kind-hearted software engineer with a golden retriever named Luna. We hit it off immediately, bonding over our shared love of dogs and our similar experiences with difficult families. We exchanged numbers and began dating, our relationship blossoming with each passing day. My name is Audrey. I'm just your average 30-year-old working as an accountant at my dad's company, managing spreadsheets more often than social interactions. Life was mostly work, home, and the occasional dinner with my dad. Parties weren't really my thing, but I went to one because my friend Amy insisted. "Come on, Audrey, you need to get out more," she'd said. So, there I was, in a crowded living room, clutching a soda and feeling out of place. That's when I first saw Jake. He was hard to miss, really tall, like a basketball player or something. I was trying to make myself as small as possible when he walked over with a beer in hand and a smile that seemed too bright for the dim room. "Hey there, I'm Jake," he said, offering a hand that swallowed mine up when I shook it. "You look like you could use a better drink." I chuckled, nervously adjusting my glasses. "Oh, this is fine. Soda's good." "White wine is much better," he grinned, heading to the makeshift bar. While he was gone, Amy buzzed by, whispering, "He's cute, right? And he's talking to you." Jake returned with 2 glasses of wine, handing one to me. "So, what brings you to this chaos?" he asked, gesturing around at the noisy room. "My friend dragged me here. I'm not much for parties," I admitted. "Me neither," Jake said with a laugh. "I'm just here 'cause my buddy insisted. Said I needed to mingle more, or some crap like that." We both laughed, and for the first time I felt a little more at ease. "Yeah, same here." "So, what do you do when you're not being dragged to parties?" he asked, taking a sip of his wine. "I'm an accountant. It's not exciting. Just numbers and more numbers," I explained, expecting him to lose interest. Cool. Numbers are important," he said. "I work in marketing myself. Lots of numbers there too, budgets and stuff." We chatted more about work, and surprisingly, Jake made it sound like the most interesting conversation ever. We moved away from the crowd, sitting on a couch in the corner. It felt like we were in our own little bubble, laughing and talking about everything from favorite TV shows to where we grew up. As the party wound down, Jake looked at me, his eyes sincere. "I had a really good time tonight, Audrey. Can I get your number? Maybe we can go out for dinner sometime?" I was taken aback. No one had ever been interested in me like this. "Sure, that'd be nice," I said, giving him my number and feeling a mix of excitement and disbelief. The next day, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Jake from the party. Wanna grab dinner tonight?" My heart did a little flip. Dinner with Jake sounded way better than sitting at home watching reruns of old sitcoms. I agreed, and that night, we met at a cozy little Italian place downtown. Jake was already there, looking casual in a fitted t-shirt and jeans. He stood up when I walked in, his smile wide. "Hey, Audrey. You made it." "Yeah, I almost chickened out," I said, taking the seat across from him. "But here I am." We ordered pasta and talked about everything under the sun, our jobs, our families, even our favorite childhood memories. Jake had a way of making me feel like the only person in the room. It was refreshing. We laughed about stupid things, like how I once accidentally wore 2 different shoes to work, and he shared stories of his worst marketing disasters. We laughed, and the night just flew by. When we finally left the restaurant, Jake suggested we take a walk. The city was quieter, and the cool night air felt good. We strolled along the river, talking about everything and nothing. It was like we'd known each other forever. Our second date was even better. Jake took me to a local jazz bar. We drank overpriced cocktails, and I even danced a bit, something I never thought I'd do. Jake was a good dancer, and his easygoing vibe made me forget all about my awkwardness. The night ended with him walking me to my door. "Thanks for the awesome night," I said, feeling a bit shy. "My pleasure," Jake replied, leaning in. Our lips met in a kiss that was surprisingly soft and sweet. It felt like the start of something real. Things moved fast after that. We spent more time together, meeting each other's friends and even our families. My dad was a bit skeptical at first, but he warmed up to Jake pretty quickly. Jake's parents were lovely, treating me like part of the family from the start. One evening, Jake and I were at his parents' house for dinner. His mom, Martha, was bustling around the kitchen, while his dad, Frank, was telling stories from his younger days. "Jake was always a troublemaker," Frank laughed. "Couldn't keep him still for a minute." "Yeah, he hasn't changed much," I teased, nudging Jake. "Hey, I'm not that bad," Jake protested, grinning. Martha set a steaming dish of lasagna on the table. "Dig in, everyone." As we ate, I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't felt in a long time. It was like I was part of something bigger, a real family. Over the next few months, we spent almost every waking moment together. He introduced me to his friends, who were a wild bunch, but they welcomed me like one of their own. We had game nights, barbecues, and even a couple of spontaneous road trips. Life with Jake was a whirlwind, but in the best possible way. He made me feel special, like I was the only woman in the world who mattered. It's been a few months since Jake and I tied the knot. The wedding was nothing fancy, but it was perfect for us. I even found myself liking how I looked in my dress, something I didn't expect. We posted pictures online, and it was nice to see everyone's happy reactions. We started off living in a small rented apartment. It was ours, and it was filled with laughter and plans for the future. But life has a way of changing when you least expect it. One evening, Jake came up to me while I was cooking dinner. He had this serious look on his face, the kind he gets when he's made a decision. "Babe, I've been thinking," he started, leaning against the counter. "My folks are getting on in years, and they really shouldn't be on their own anymore. What do you think about moving in with them to help out?" I was surprised, but it made sense. His parents had always been welcoming to me, treating me more like a daughter than a daughter-in-law. "I think it's a great idea," I said, smiling at him. "Let's do it." Moving in with Jake's parents was smoother than I expected. They welcomed us with open arms, happy to have more life and energy in their old house. It felt good, being able to help them out. A few weeks into our new living arrangement, we were all sitting around the dinner table when Jake brought up something new. "The house needs some serious repairs," he said. His parents nodded, looking a bit embarrassed. "I was thinking," Jake continued, "since Mom and Dad don't have the money to cover it, maybe we could use our savings. What do you think?" I was taken aback. We weren't rich, and our savings weren't exactly a fortune. I hesitated, unsure, but before I could say anything, Martha started crying. "Oh, I just hate the thought of asking you kids for help like this, but the roof's leaking and the winter's coming." Seeing her tears, I couldn't say no. "Okay," I said softly. "We'll figure it out, don't worry." We agreed to split the costs, but almost immediately after, Jake dropped another bomb. "I got some bad news today at work," he sighed one evening, looking defeated. "They're cutting back, and I've been demoted. Salaries slashed." My heart sank. "So, what does that mean for the repairs?" "It means I can't put in my share. Not right now," he said, avoiding my eyes. So, just like that, the financial burden fell on me. Every time his parents thanked me for fixing up the house, praising how great it was looking, I felt a mix of pride and resentment building up inside me. I loved them, but the situation was straining, more than I wanted to admit. The house looked completely different. 6 months of hard work, and everything from the plumbing to the furniture was brand new. I felt a mix of pride and worry, seeing all the changes. I'd paid for everything, after all. Jake's parents insisted on throwing a dinner party to celebrate. "You've done so much for us, Audrey. We can't thank you enough," Martha said as she set the table with her best china. The smell of roast beef filled the air, and laughter echoed around the newly painted walls. Halfway through dinner, however, the atmosphere shifted. Jake's mom suddenly burst into tears, her hands trembling as she set down her fork. "I can't believe we're going to lose this beautiful home after all the work Audrey put into it." I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. "Lose it? What do you mean?" There was a heavy silence before Frank spoke, his voice low. "We took out a mortgage years back. It's gotten to be too much. We owe $250,000, and if we don't pay up in 2 months, the bank will take the house." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "But, all the money I've put in, why didn't you tell me before?" "We didn't want to worry you, dear," his mom said, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. Jake put his hand on my arm, his voice urgent. "Audrey, you can help us out here. Your dad, he's got the means. Maybe he could." I pulled away, feeling cornered. "You want me to ask my dad for $250,000? Just like that? Look, I know it's a lot, but think about it. This house will be ours one day." "It'll be yours," Jake pressed, his eyes pleading. I spent a restless night tossing and turning, the weight of the request heavy on my chest. The next morning, I called my dad. I explained everything, the debt, the renovations, the predicament. My dad listened quietly on the other end of the line. When I finished, there was a long pause. "I'll help," he finally said. "But I'm not just handing over the money. I want receipts, I want agreements. I'm not going to see you taken advantage of." Relief washed over me, followed quickly by anxiety about how Jake would take the news. When I told him, he was clearly annoyed. "Your dad doesn't trust me," he snapped. "It's not about trust," I insisted, feeling my patience fray. "It's about being smart with money. It's a lot of money, Jake. We need to be careful." Jake muttered something under his breath and walked away, leaving me to wonder if we'd ever get past this. The agreement with my dad went through, and he transferred the money, all formal and documented. Jake's parents were grateful, their constant thanks grating on me as I signed papers and organized the financial rescue of their home. The whole situation left me feeling used. I began to question Jake's intentions, his love. Was it all just convenience? Marrying the daughter of a wealthy man? The doubts grew each day, festering like an untreated wound. The month following the mortgage ordeal was a blur. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I got the call that changed everything. It was my Aunt Linda on the line, her voice choked with tears. "Audrey, your father, he's had a heart attack. He didn't make it." Hearing that news felt like being hit by a truck. My dad was gone, just like that. The grief was overwhelming, but I had no time to process it. There were funeral arrangements to be made, relatives to inform, and a million little details to sort out. In the midst of this chaos, I came back home earlier than usual one afternoon after meeting with the funeral agency. The house was supposed to be empty, so I quietly unlocked the front door, not wanting to disturb any lingering silence with my sobs. But the moment I stepped inside, I heard voices coming from the living room. It was Jake, his mother, and his father. They didn't hear me come in. I froze by the door, my hand still on the knob, and listened. "I can't believe how easy it was to get her to cough up all that cash," Jake was saying, a harsh laugh escaping him. "And now, with her old man out of the picture, I'll be free." Martha's voice chimed in, sickly sweet. "Just be patient, honey. We've almost got everything we wanted. We just need to handle those receipts." Jake's disgust was palpable as he replied, "I'm tired of playing the doting husband. She's just so, ugh, it disgusts me. And I've got Angie waiting. She's everything Audrey isn't." My heart stopped. Angie? He had someone else? The pain was immediate and sharp, a betrayal I hadn't even considered. Frank cautioned, "Keep it together a bit longer. Once we get rid of those receipts, you can dump her and keep the money clean." "And those receipts will be ashes soon enough," Jake snarled. "I'll make sure of it." I couldn't listen anymore. The grief for my father mixed with the shock of betrayal, churning in my stomach. I slammed the door hard, making my presence known. "Oh, Audrey, you're back early," Martha said, switching to her sweet old lady act so fast it made my head spin. "How's everything going with the funeral plans, dear?" "Fine," I managed to choke out, keeping my voice steady. "Everything's under control." That evening, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The man I married, the family I trusted, they were nothing but con artists. They saw me as a walking bank account, nothing more. The next few days, I went through the motions. I nodded as Jake and his parents talked about the future, their future, filled with my money. Each word from them fueled my resolve. They didn't know it yet, but their deceitful game was about to come crashing down. I was going to make sure of it. After the last murmurs of condolences had faded and the final guests drifted out of the funeral, I stood outside my father-in-law's house, bracing myself. As we all shuffled inside, the false somberness from Jake and his parents was stifling. They had performed well at the funeral, their eyes brimming with crocodile tears, their hands clasped in feigned sorrow. But the real performance was about to begin, just us, no audience. The door clicked shut behind the last relative, and I watched. Watched as the veneer of grief melted off Jake's face, his features twisting into a smirk that chilled my blood. His parents weren't far behind, their mournful expressions dissolving into something hard and greedy. Jake wasted no time. "Audrey, it's time for you to go," he said, the cruel twist of his lips like a slap. "I'm done pretending." I felt my pulse quicken, but kept my face calm. "Go? Whatever do you mean?" "Don't act stupid, Audrey. I can't stand you," Jake sneered, his words like daggers. "I've got someone else, someone young and sexy. Not a dull, pathetic woman like you." Martha stepped forward, her voice dripping with disdain. "We were only putting up with you because of your money, darling. Now that your father's gone, and his money's done fixing this place, you're useless to us." Her words stung, each one a pointed thorn. "And the house? I paid for all this." I gestured around. "My money, remember?" Jake's grin grew wider. "Oh, those receipts? I found them in your dad's things, and burned them. They're gone, Audrey. Just like your money. They thought they had me cornered, thought they could discard me like trash." But I started laughing, quietly at first, then louder, my body shaking with each unrestrained burst. Tears streamed down my cheeks, not from sadness or pain, but from the sheer release of it all. They watched me, their smugness faltering into confusion. Jake's mother put a hand on his arm, her eyes wide with uncertainty. "Why are you laughing?" Jake demanded, his voice a mix of irritation and bewilderment. I wiped the tears from my face, my laughter subsiding into chuckles. "Because, Jake, you're a fool. You all are. You think you played me, but I've known about your little games from the start." Their faces turned pale, the confidence draining away as quickly as it had surged. I stood up straighter, the laughter now a weapon sharpened by truth. "And another thing," I continued, the last traces of my laughter dying down to a serious, cold calm. "Those receipts you burned? They were copies. The real ones? Safely filed away with my lawyer, along with a few other interesting documents." Jake's eyes widened, his earlier bravado crumbling. "What do you mean? What documents?" "Oh, you'll see," I said, a slow, knowing smile spreading across my face. "You'll all see very soon." As I left them standing there, stunned and silent, I knew the battle was just beginning. But it was a battle I was now ready to fight, armed with the truth and nothing left to lose. That evening, I drove to my dad's house, a place that now felt more like a sanctuary than ever. As soon as I settled in, I rang our family lawyer, Mr. Clarkson. I need you to draft a preliminary request for the return of the $250,000 and send it to them. It's time they face the consequences, I said, my voice steady but filled with a resolve that had been forged in betrayal. Mr. Clarkson agreed without hesitation. I'll take care of it immediately, he assured me, and true to his word, the letter was sent out the next day. A few days later, Jake called me, his voice frantic. "What's this letter we got? Why are you threatening us with court?" he stammered. I kept my cool, despite the satisfaction that pricked at me, hearing him squirm. "This is something we should discuss in person. I've asked Mr. Clarkson to handle it." "Meet me at his office," I said and hung up before he could reply. The meeting was set, and when Jake and his parents walked into Mr. Clarkson's office, the air was thick with tension. They looked like trapped animals, eyes darting, looking for an escape that wasn't there. Mr. Clarkson wasted no time. "As per the receipt your son signed when he accepted the $250,000 from my client's father," he began, his voice firm and commanding, "there is a clause which stipulates that the lender reserves the right to demand repayment at any time. We are exercising that right now." Jake's face went white, his parents too, their earlier arrogance washed away by fear. "But we don't have that kind of money right now," Jake pleaded, his voice cracking. "That's not my client's concern. You entered into a legally binding agreement, and we expect it to be honored," Mr. Clarkson continued, his gaze unwavering. The desperation was palpable as Frank chimed in. "Please, can't we work something out? We'll do anything." Mr. Clarkson and I exchanged a brief look before he answered. "The only acceptable resolution here is for you to transfer the title of your house to my client, as compensation for the unreturned loan. Otherwise, we will see you in court." The words hung heavy in the room. Finally, seeing no other option, Jake and his parents nodded reluctantly. Mr. Clarkson slid a prepared contract across the table. "Sign here," he instructed, his tone indicating no room for further discussion. With trembling hands, they signed the document, officially transferring ownership of the house to me. The house that I had unknowingly paid for, the house that was supposed to be a symbol of familial unity but had become a battleground of deceit. Later, I filed for divorce from Jake. It was uncontested, he knew he had no footing to challenge anything after everything that had happened. Standing in the doorway of the house that now legally belonged to me, watching Jake and his parents leave with their belongings, a smile spread across my face. Not out of malice, but liberation. It's been a whole year since I slammed the door on that chapter of my life. The divorce, taking back what was mine, it feels like a lifetime ago, but also just yesterday. Running Dad's company has been a wild ride. I remember sitting in his office that first day, the leather chair feeling too big, the desk cluttered with papers about deals and contracts I barely understood. But I learned, faster than I thought I could. Turns out, I'm pretty good at this. Who would have thought? I get updates about Jake and his family through the grapevine. Just last week, Amy dropped by my office, her eyes wide with the latest gossip. Guess what? Jake's little girlfriend dumped him. Left him flat. And his parents? They're squeezed into some tiny apartment on the outskirts of town. I kept my face neutral, but inside, I felt nothing. No joy from their downfall, no pain, just emptiness. They were just people I used to know, people who tried to use me, nothing more. Really? Well, life goes on, doesn't it? I responded, turning back to the spreadsheets on my desk. Audrey, aren't you even a bit happy? After all they did? Amy prodded, leaning against my desk. I looked up, met her gaze squarely. Amy, I'm too busy for schadenfreude. Running this company, keeping Dad's legacy alive, that's my life now. What happens to Jake or his parents, it doesn't matter to me anymore. Amy nodded, pushing off from the desk. You're better than I am then. I'd be throwing a party. I laughed, but it was short-lived. No parties. There's too much work to do. Have you seen the Henderson proposal? I'm thinking we should counter with. Always business with you. Amy teased, but she was smiling. Alright, boss lady, I'll let you get back to it. After she left, I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at the cityscape below. I thought about Jake and his parents, crammed into that tiny apartment. A part of me wondered if I should feel something, some sort of triumph, but there was nothing. The phone rang, snapping me out of my reverie. It was Marcus, our head of sales. Audrey, have you got a minute? There's a bit of a situation with one of the suppliers. On my way, I said, standing up. Problems, solutions, growth, losses, my days were full of these. And I loved it. The challenge, the rush of sealing a deal, the satisfaction of seeing my employees motivated and pushing forward. This was where I was meant to be. I thought I'd always be the quiet, reliable accountant in the background. But life had a funny way of pushing us into the unknown, into battles we never thought we'd fight. I'm Elizabeth, Liz to friends, and I've been handling books at my dad's business since I graduated. We're in sports gear, anything a gym could need, we supply. It's a family gig, Dad started it, and I kind of fell into it after school. I never minded the numbers or the routine. It paid well, kept me close to family, and honestly, wasn't too taxing. The night I met Tom was at our annual company party. It was one of those evenings filled with too much cheap wine and those little sandwiches everyone pretends to like. I was stuck near the buffet, debating if I should try the dodgy-looking shrimp, when he walked over, plate in hand, that easy smile playing on his lips. Trust me, the shrimp's a gamble, but the mini quiches? Solid choice, he said, nudging the plate a bit towards me as he took one himself. I laughed, taking his advice. Thanks, I'm Liz, by the way. Tom. I work at the branch across town. Heard a lot about you, the boss's daughter and all. Hopefully, all good things, I said, trying to sound lighthearted. We moved away from the food, finding quieter spots to chat through the night. Tom was easy to talk to, a bit too smooth maybe, but it was refreshing. His humor was a mix of sarcasm and wit, and he had an answer for everything. We talked more about everything, music, movies, places we'd traveled. He had a way of making the evening fly by, and when he suggested grabbing coffee later in the week, I didn't hesitate. We should do this again, without the stale sandwiches and forced mingling. There's a great little cafe downtown, quiet, good for talking. Sounds good to me, I agreed, and we exchanged numbers. As I watched him mingle with others, Dad came over, a look of approval on his face. Tom's a good man, sharp. Keeps things running smoothly over at his branch. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of laughter and plans. As I left the party, I felt lighter than I had in months, maybe even excited. Little did I know, that night was the start of everything, good and bad. That first meeting at the cafe wasn't supposed to turn into anything big. Just coffee, maybe a pastry, and a bit of chat outside the noisy backdrop of the corporate party. But it turned into dinner, and not long after, it turned into a life together. We got married, surrounded by family and friends who seemed just as swept up in our whirlwind romance as we were. My parents loved Tom from the start. Dad even made him his deputy, and later bumped him up to head of the company. Everything seemed like it was falling into place perfectly. After the wedding, I shifted to working from home. I managed the accounts from our kitchen table, surrounded by piles of papers and the hum of the daily grind. We thought about having kids too, dreamed about it really, but life threw us a curveball. Medical reasons, the doctors said, made it a tough bet. It was a hard pill to swallow, but Tom never seemed fazed by it. He just kept on, business as usual. 9 years. It sounds like a lot when you say it out loud. 9 years of marriage can smooth out any sharp edges, or so I thought. Things with Tom had shifted, like slow-moving tectonic plates, until one day you realize there's a chasm between you. Lately, Tom had been coming home late, the scent of cologne clinging to him like a new shadow. He'd brush past me in the hallway, his face buried in his phone, fingers tapping away messages I wasn't meant to see. "Who's that keeping you so busy?" I'd ask, trying to keep my tone light, casual. Just work stuff, you know how it is. New contracts, demanding clients. He'd reply without looking up. I nodded, pretending to believe him. But the seed of doubt was planted, watered by his growing indifference. The balance at home had shifted too. I was juggling the accounts from home, handling the chores, trying to keep everything running like a well-oiled machine. But even machines break down. One evening, I was elbow-deep in dish soap when Tom walked in. He glanced at the sink, then at me, and shook his head. "You should wear gloves, Liz. Your hands are starting to look rough," he said, his voice flat. I turned off the tap, drying my hands on a towel. "Maybe you could help out now and then, you know? It's not just my job to clean up." Tom snorted, a short, harsh sound. "I'm busting my ass at work so we can afford not to worry about money, and you want me to come home and do dishes? It's called helping, Tom. It's what people who live together do for each other." I shot back, my patience fraying at the edges. He rolled his eyes, dismissing the conversation with a wave of his hand as he headed toward the living room. "I don't have time for this, Liz." That was his new favorite phrase. I don't have time. It echoed in the empty spaces of our conversations, filling them with silences that were too loud to ignore. One night, as I was folding laundry, I tried again. "We could get someone to help around the house." "It's not about the money, you said it yourself." Tom looked up from his laptop, irritation creasing his forehead. "And I told you before, I don't want strangers in our house. We're not having this discussion again." "It's like you don't even see how tired I am," I said, the words heavier than the bedspread I was trying to straighten. He closed his laptop with a snap. "You're tired? Really, Liz? You sit at home all day, and you're tired?" And just like that, he was out the door, the sound of it closing behind him like a period at the end of a long, run-on sentence. Between the never-ending laundry, cooking, and cleaning, finding time for myself had become a luxury I couldn't afford. My appearance? It took a back seat, something Tom didn't fail to notice, or criticize. "You really should try to keep up a bit, Liz," he'd say, flipping through channels, pausing on images of polished actresses and pop stars who were my age or older. "Look at them, they manage to look good. What's your excuse?" I sighed, tired of the same old argument. "Tom, those women have teams, stylists, makeup artists, probably a plastic surgeon on speed dial. It's not a fair comparison." He scoffed, unimpressed. "Excuses, Liz. They take care of themselves. That's the difference." His words stung, and what hurt more was the cold, calculating way he'd look at me sometimes. Those looks carried no warmth, no love, just a harsh assessment, as if he was tallying my flaws like I was another line in one of my spreadsheets. As weeks slid into months, the vibe between Tom and me grew colder than a winter draft. He was home less, and when he was, it felt like he was miles away. I'd catch him lost in thought, his phone always buzzing silently beside him. Sometimes, he'd snap it up so fast you'd think it was about to explode. "Late night?" I called out to his retreating back one evening as he came in later than usual. He paused, shoulders tense. "Yeah, had to smooth over some client issues. You know how it is." I nodded, though he wasn't looking to see it. Something in his tone didn't sit right with me. His words were too rehearsed, like he had been practicing them all the way home. A few days later, he slipped up. His phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while he was showering. I stared at it, debating. It wasn't right to snoop, but the gnawing doubt wouldn't leave me be. As I stood there, the screen lit up again, a message preview flashing briefly. "Can't wait to see you tomorrow, kiss, Jess." My heart sank to my feet. Who was Jess? His finger moved so quick to lock the phone when he saw me near it before. I didn't know what to do, torn between confronting him and finding out more on my own. I made a decision then, one I never thought I'd make. I contacted a detective. It felt sneaky, underhanded, but I needed the truth more than I needed to feel noble about how I got it. "Look, I just want to know what's going on. I think my husband's seeing someone else. I whispered over the phone, feeling like a traitor. The detective was all business. "We can handle this discreetly. You'll have answers within a week." I hung up, feeling a mix of relief and dread. Knowing was better than wondering, right? For the next few days, I played the part of the oblivious wife. Tom's late nights continued, his excuses more flimsy. I smiled, nodded, and waited. The detective's call couldn't come soon enough. The day that changed my whole life started with a tornado. The air was thick with tension and the ominous buzz of an incoming storm. I heard the tornado sirens in the distance, a wailing reminder that nature was about to unleash its fury. Tom had been on edge all morning, pacing and frequently checking his phone, which was odd given the severity of the weather forecast. "Hey, Liz, can you do me a favor? The weather radio is in the barn. I need you to grab it so we can keep track of the storm," Tom said, his voice carrying a sharpness that felt like a command more than a request. I grabbed my jacket, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The wind was picking up, howling around the corners of the house as I made my way to the barn. The sky was a bruised mix of gray and black, swirling ominously. As I entered the barn, the musty smell of old hay and machine oil hit me. I flicked on the light and started searching for the radio, but something felt off. The barn was too quiet, the usual creaks and groans of the old structure eerily absent over the roar of the wind outside. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind me. I spun around, heart pounding, and tried the handle. It wouldn't budge. "Tom," I yelled, banging on the wood. "This isn't funny. Let me out." Through the thin crack under the door, I saw his shadow. He was standing there, not moving, not helping. "Liz, listen." His voice was cold, emotionless. "I locked you in. A very powerful tornado is coming. It will hit here, and when it does, the barn will go first." My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about? Why would you do this?" "It's simple, really. You die in the tornado, it looks like an accident. I inherit everything, and I'm free," he said, each word slicing through the howling wind like a knife. I pounded on the door with both fists, disbelief and fear mingling with each sharp thud. "You can't do this, Tom. Open the door." But his footsteps receded, the crunch of gravel under his boots growing fainter until there was nothing but the storm's roar left to answer me. Panic clawed at my throat as I scrambled around the barn, looking for anything to break the door or signal for help. The realization that Tom had planned this, had wanted me gone, was a betrayal that burned hotter than my fear. Then, as the barn began to shudder with the first violent gusts, I heard another sound, barking. Mr. Jenkins' dog, a scrappy little beagle named Bandit, was outside, his barks punctuated by frantic whines. "Here. I'm in here, Bandit," I screamed, hoping his owner wasn't too far behind. Moments later, the door burst open, and there was Mr. Jenkins, wide-eyed, with Bandit tugging at his heels. "Liz." Thank God, I heard Bandit barking and knew something was wrong. He shouted over the wind, grabbing my arm and pulling me out into the storm. We ran together, heading for his house, the tornado sirens wail a grim soundtrack to our escape. As we reached his house, I dared to look back. The barn was already disappearing into the swirling debris, a casualty of the storm and of Tom's cruel plot. After Mr. Jenkins pulled me from the remains of the barn, he led me down into the dimly lit basement, where the sound of the tornado seemed a little more distant. He handed me a steaming cup of coffee and tuned the weather radio to the latest updates. The broadcasters were calling it a surprisingly powerful storm, one that hadn't been anticipated to hit with such ferocity. As I wrapped my hands around the warm mug, Mr. Jenkins settled across from me, his eyes filled with concern. "Liz, what in the world happened out there? Why was Bandit barking at the barn?" I took a deep breath, my voice shaky as I started to explain. "Tom, he locked me in there. On purpose. Said it was so the tornado would take care of me." Mr. Jenkins' eyebrows shot up, his weathered face crinkling in shock. "He did what now? That can't be right, Liz." "It's true," I insisted, the reality of it making my voice firmer. "He told me himself. said after the tornado, he'd be free to do as he pleased. The old man shook his head, disbelief etched into every line on his face. That's cold, Liz. Real cold. And stupid. Did he really think he'd get away with it? I shrugged, the absurdity of the situation not lost on me, despite the terror it had inspired. I guess he thought the storm would cover everything up. Make it look like an accident. Shock painted Mr. Jenkins' features, and he stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the concrete floor. We need to call the police, now. He fished his phone from his pocket, tapping and swiping, but his face fell. No signal. Damn storm's knocked out everything. We'll have to wait it out. I nodded, the reality of the situation sinking in. Outside, the wind howled like a beast at the gates, angry and relentless. Inside, the storm of betrayal and deceit was just as chaotic in my mind. Mr. Jenkins noticed my distant look and put a gentle hand on my shoulder. We've got a few hours before this lets up and we can get a call out. Then we'll get the police, and they'll take care of Tom. He won't get away with this. His words were meant to comfort, but a faint smile was all I could muster. How had I lived all these years alongside a man capable of such cold-blooded calculation? The man I had shared meals with, laughed with, and trusted with my life, planning my end so he could start anew. The hours ticked by, marked by the steady drip of a leak somewhere in the corner of the cellar and the relentless battering of the storm against the little house. Mr. Jenkins made us more coffee, and we sat mostly in silence, listening to the crackle of the radio and the distant booms of thunder. When Mr. Jenkins and I finally emerged from the storm cellar, the world looked like it had been turned inside out. Trees were down, houses were damaged, and my heart was heavy as we walked towards what remained of my home. As we approached, I saw a crowd gathered, neighbors, emergency responders, and there, in the midst of them all, was Tom. He was putting on quite a show, sobbing and clutching one of my concerned neighbors, as if he was the bereaved. Seeing him like that, playing the part of the devastated husband, ignited something fierce within me. I strode forward, my steps firm, despite the soft, mud-slicked ground. Liz. Tom's act dropped as his eyes met mine. His face went white, his fake tears drying up instantaneously. The crowd turned, a collective gasp rising as they saw me, very much alive. I didn't break stride, walking right up to him, feeling every eye on us. What's the matter, Tom? You look like you've seen a ghost, I said, my voice loud and clear, carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. Tom stuttered, his usual smooth demeanor crumbling. Liz, I thought you were. He couldn't finish his sentence, his gaze darting around, looking for any kind of sympathy or support from our neighbors. I was in the barn, Tom. Locked in. Just like you planned, right? I pushed on, not giving him room to wriggle out of the truth. He shook his head, a pathetic attempt at denial. No, that's not, it was an accident. Locked from the outside, Tom. Mr. Jenkins found me. He saved my life. I turned to gesture at Mr. Jenkins, who nodded, stepping forward to support my claims. It's true, Mr. Jenkins chimed in. Found her locked tight in that barn, just before it was destroyed. Had to break her out. The crowd's murmur turned into an uproar. Neighbors exchanged shocked glances, their faces a mix of disbelief and anger towards Tom. Seeing the doubt in their eyes, I pulled out my phone. The detective had come through last night, just before the storm. I had proof now, pictures and messages between Tom and his mistress. And if you're looking for a motive, I said, swiping through my phone to pull up the damning evidence. Here it is. I held up the screen for Tom, and for anyone else who was close enough to see. Pictures of Tom with another woman, cozy and smiling in a way he hadn't with me in months. Tom's face went from white to red, anger replacing his fear. You had me followed? You invaded my privacy? That's your takeaway here? I was incredulous, almost laughing at his audacity. Not that you tried to kill your wife. A police officer, who had been called to the scene by a neighbor, finally stepped forward. He'd heard enough and seen the photos I'd shown. Mr. Walters, I'm going to need you to come with me. After the police car drove off, the tension seemed to drain out of the crowd. Neighbors approached, offering hugs, expressions of shock, and support. My parents came through the crowd, my mom in tears, my dad with an arm around her shoulders, both of them engulfing me in a tight embrace. "We thought we'd lost you," Mom whispered, holding me close. "I'm okay, Mom," I assured her, squeezing her back. "I'm okay." The day moved on, and the crowd eventually dispersed. I stood there with Mr. Jenkins and my parents, looking at the damage, at the debris that was once my barn, at the life I had almost lost. In the weeks that followed, my life became a whirlwind, not of debris and storm winds, but of legal papers, meetings, and the hard, unyielding benches of courtrooms. Tom's trial was fast-tracked given the nature of his crime, and every time I sat in that courtroom, I saw a man I no longer recognized. He looked smaller somehow, caged in by his own misdeeds. One afternoon, as I was getting ready to head to court, my dad stopped by. He had been my rock through this ordeal, never faltering in his support. "Liz, you ready for this today?" he asked, his voice steady, but his concern evident in his eyes. I nodded, adjusting the scarf around my neck. "I have to be, Dad. It's not just for me. It's to show him he can't just get away with it." The courtroom was packed, a silent testament to the gravity of the case. As the prosecutor laid out Tom's intentions and actions, the air seemed to thicken with each word spoken. When it was my turn to testify, I stood, feeling the weight of every gaze in the room. Tom wouldn't meet my eyes as I recounted what happened, his lawyer scribbling notes furiously as I spoke. The hardest part was reliving the fear, voicing it out loud in a room so quiet you could hear a pin drop. After I spoke, the defense did their best to muddy the waters, suggesting misunderstanding, desperation, but the evidence was irrefutable. The judge's gavel was a sound of finality when it came down. "Guilty of attempted murder," the judge declared, his voice resolute and clear. The courtroom erupted into murmurs, a cacophony of relief and disbelief. As the bailiffs took Tom away, his glance finally met mine. There was a plea there, maybe for forgiveness, for some sliver of the past to hold on to. The aftermath of the trial was a quieter sort of storm. Dad had removed Tom from the company the day after my rescue, and his position was still vacant, the office untouched. "You know, Liz," Dad said one evening as we were closing up the office together, "we should start looking for someone to fill Tom's position. The company needs leadership." I paused, considering. "Maybe that leader could be me," I suggested, the idea forming fully for the first time. Dad looked at me, surprise etched across his features, then his face softened into a smile. "I think that's a fantastic idea. You've been the backbone of this place for more years than anyone else." Life started to settle into a new normal. I was busier than ever with the company and rebuilding my life piece by piece. The community's support was overwhelming, with neighbors and friends constantly checking in or dropping by with food, flowers, and words of encouragement. After Tom's conviction, the divorce was quick and to the point. There wasn't much to discuss. The court granted me all his properties on the grounds of his deceit and the severe nature of his betrayal. A few months into navigating my new life as the head of the company and rebuilding from the emotional rubble, I got an unexpected call. It was Tom's lawyer, sounding overly formal and slightly uncomfortable. "Ms. Walters, Tom would like to meet with you. He's requested a visit at the prison," he relayed. I paused, the past and its shadows briefly clouding my day. "Did he say why?" "He mentioned needing to apologize, to make amends for his actions," the lawyer continued, his voice carefully neutral. I took a deep breath, the memory swirling, bitter and sharp. "Tell him I'll think about it." A week later, I stood outside the prison, the building stark and uninviting. Inside, I was led through a series of security checks, before being shown to a small, stark room with chairs on either side of a glass partition. Tom was already there, looking older, the weight of his guilt etched into his features. He picked up the phone on his side as soon as I sat down. "Liz, thank you for coming," he started, his voice shaky. I picked up the receiver, my grip firm. Let's skip the pleasantries, Tom. What do you want? Tom swallowed, his eyes not meeting mine. I'm sorry, Liz. For everything. I was hoping, maybe you could find it in you to forgive me, to speak on my behalf for a pardon. Tom, you tried to kill me. You planned it so you could be with someone else while keeping everything we built together. You're not asking for forgiveness, you're asking for a favor because you're still trying to take the easy way out, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I know it's a lot to ask, but... I cut him off, needing to finish this on my own terms. No, Tom. I came here for closure, not to offer you absolution. You need to serve your time, just like I had to endure the pain and the fear you caused. Tom's face crumpled, and he finally looked at me, really looked at me. There was desperation there, but behind it, I saw the realization that I was no longer the woman he thought he could manipulate. I can't help you, Tom. I won't, I said firmly, setting down the receiver with a finality that felt like the closing of a heavy door. I walked out of that prison, feeling lighter than I had in years. It was over. I was free, not just from Tom, but from the hold the past had on me. It's a sunny Tuesday morning, and I'm driving down the familiar stretch of Elm Street towards one of the quaint parts of town. I'm Claire, by the way, an interior designer. I've been doing this for over a decade now. My job? To turn houses into homes, making every corner cozy and every space inviting. I work for a small company that's doing surprisingly well, considering the big names we're up against. Today, I've got an appointment with Mrs. Evelyn, an elderly lady who's been wanting to revamp her living room. She sounded sweet on the phone, but you never know with clients until you meet them. Pulling up to a charming, slightly worn-down bungalow, I grab my sketchpad, tape measure, and color swatches from the passenger seat and make my way to the front door. I ring the bell, adjusting my blouse absent-mindedly. It's been a hectic morning, skipping breakfast and all, and now my stomach's complaining. The door swings open, and there stands Mrs. Evelyn, a small woman with a shock of white hair and a warm smile that crinkles the corners of her eyes. Oh, my dear. Come in, she beckons with a frail hand. Her living room is a throwback to the 70s, with floral wallpaper and heavy, dark furniture. It's like stepping into a time capsule. So, what can we do to brighten up this lovely space? I ask, ready with my pencil and pad. Mrs. Evelyn leads me to a sofa, her steps slow but sure. I want something modern yet comfy. Not too stiff, you know? This room has seen many Christmases and many lazy Sundays. It should feel like that. We chat about colors and textures, and I show her some swatches. As we're deep in discussion, my stomach decides to perform a solo, loudly. I'm mortified. Mrs. Evelyn chuckles, not missing a beat. Sounds like someone's hungry. Let's have some lunch, shall we? Before I can protest, she's off to the kitchen. I follow, still a bit embarrassed, but grateful. As she tosses a salad, she starts asking personal questions. So, dear, are you married? How's the job treating you? I laugh, trying to keep it light. Oh, just married to my job right now. It eats up most of my time. She gives me a mysterious smile and nods, like she knows a secret I don't. Lunch is simple but delicious, and just as we're wrapping up, the doorbell rings. That'll be my son, Mark. He's just about your age, she says with a wink. I feel a setup coming on. Mark turns out to be quite the charmer, tall and more handsome than I expected. Mrs. Evelyn quickly excuses herself, leaving us to talk about, supposedly, the living room. So, you're the mastermind behind my mom's new retreat? Mark begins, flashing a grin. Guilty as charged. Your mom has great taste, though. We're going for cozy modern. We dive into a lively discussion about design trends, and I find myself genuinely enjoying his company. By the time Mrs. Evelyn returns, Mark and I have exchanged numbers to discuss further ideas, or so we tell her. So there I was, a few months down the line, smack dab in the middle of planning a life with Mark. He'd popped the question on a chilly evening by the lake, simple and straightforward, just like him. "Claire, wanna make this a forever thing?" he'd asked, holding out a ring, no pomp or show. I'd laughed, the cold making puffs of air visible, and said, "Yeah, let's do it." And that was that. The next weeks were a whirlwind of wedding planning. Who knew pulling together a simple wedding could be such a hassle? Mark and I wanted it low-key, but Linda, his mom, had other ideas. Linda was waving a bridal magazine in the air, pointing at a picture of a lavish setup. "Look at this, Claire. Wouldn't it be wonderful? A wedding like this talks, you know." I tried to steer the conversation back to reasonable waters. "Linda, we appreciate that, but we really want a wedding that feels like us. Not too big, just family and close friends." Linda narrowed her eyes a bit, sizing me up. "And who's footing the bill for this modest shindig? You make good money, Claire. Surely, you can afford a little splurge?" Mark's cheeks went red. We hadn't really nailed down the gritty details of finances yet. I sighed. "We're splitting it. That's only fair, right?" "Fair, yes, but sometimes you lean in a bit where it counts, right?" Linda pressed, not one to back down. The conversation ended with coffee and stale cake, but it set the tone for the next few weeks. The wedding turned out beautiful, without the excessive flair Linda wanted. It was perfect for us, intimate and genuine. After the wedding, life began to settle. Or so I thought. We decided to move out of my cramped apartment into something bigger. Mark found a place that was a bit of a stretch financially, but he was so excited about it. "It's perfect, Claire. You'll have space for your office, and I can finally start my home brewery thing." The apartment was indeed something, $3,000 a month kind of something. We toured the empty space, its vastness echoing our footsteps. "It's great, but the rent, Mark." I trailed off, already doing the math in my head. "We'll make it work. I've got some savings, and hey, maybe I'll get that promotion soon," Mark replied, the eternal optimist. I agreed, reluctantly. "Okay, but let's be smart about furnishing. I can handle that part, get us some deals." I took charge of turning the apartment into our home, pouring my savings into furniture that made sense and a few splurges, because sometimes, you need that ridiculously comfy armchair that swallows you whole. Mark and I had just gotten settled when his mom decided to drop by for her first official visit since we moved. The moment Linda walked in, her eyes widened, taking in the new setup. "Oh, Claire, this place, it's just exquisite. I want the same for my house, you know, the same couch, these lamps, everything." I just smiled, not wanting to dive into that conversation. "Glad you like it, Linda." As Linda rambled on about furniture, I excused myself to check on dinner, leaving them to chat about home aesthetics. Around the same time, work had thrown me a curveball. Anna, the director's daughter, joined our design team. Initially, I braced myself for a storm of entitlement, but she was nothing like I expected. We clicked almost instantly, much to my surprise. One evening, after a long brainstorming session at work, I mentioned to Mark how talented Anna was and how she was lined up to take over from her dad someday. Mark seemed unusually interested. "We should have her over for dinner. It'd be good for you, networking and all that," he suggested one night as we were cleaning up the kitchen. A week later, Anna stood in our living room, her eyes sparkling with genuine admiration. "Claire, this is beyond beautiful. Seriously, this might be the best design project I've ever seen." As the evening progressed, Mark outdid himself in the kitchen, dishing out his best recipes. He was all charm and jokes, keeping Anna laughing and engaged. It was unlike him to take such a lead during our gatherings, and it set off a faint alarm in my mind. "Why are you laying it on so thick?" I whispered to him in the kitchen while we were serving dessert. Mark kept his voice low, a cautious glance towards the dining room where Anna was seated. "Babe, I'm just trying to help. If she likes us, likes you, it could mean big things for your career. You know, she could speed things up at work." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of laughter and too many glasses of wine. Anna seemed oblivious to the undercurrents, thoroughly enjoying herself. As she left, she hugged me tightly. "Thank you for tonight, Claire. I haven't had this much fun in ages." I closed the door behind her, leaning against it, the weight of the evening settling on my shoulders. Mark joined me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "See? I told you it'd go great." I nodded, not entirely convinced. "Yeah, great," I echoed, but my mind was already turning, questions and doubts lining up like unwelcome guests. Mark had always been a jeans and t-shirt kind of guy, easygoing with a casual charm that had first drawn me in. So, when he started swapping his usual attire for sharp suits and freshly styled hair, it was hard not to notice. "What's with the new look?" I asked one morning as he adjusted his tie in the mirror, looking more like a catalog model than the man I married. He flashed a grin, meeting my eyes through the reflection. "Just trying to keep up with my gorgeous wife, you know? And, well, looking sharp might help me move up at work." I raised an eyebrow, but let it slide. "As long as you don't start ironing your socks, we're good," I joked, though a part of me wondered if there was more to his makeover. The new wardrobe became the least of my worries when Mark suggested another dinner out, this time inviting Anna. "It'll be fun," he insisted. "She loved the last dinner at our place. Why not hit the town?" I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but something felt off. Still, I agreed, and the evening was set. We chose a fancy Italian place downtown, the kind where you felt compelled to dress up a bit. Mark was all smiles, pulling out chairs and playing the perfect host. As we settled into our seats, the conversation flowed easily, mostly thanks to Anna's lively stories about her recent travels. When the bill came, Mark reached for it with a flourish. "Allow me, a treat for such a wonderful evening," he declared, then leaned in close to me. "Babe, I forgot my card at home. Can you cover this?" I nodded, keeping my smile plastered on as I handed my card to the waiter. Anna, oblivious to the exchange, thanked Mark. "You're quite the gentleman tonight," she said, her smile warm. Driving home, the evening replayed in my mind. "Mark, why the sudden show of generosity every time Anna's around? You forgetting your card is getting old." He kept his eyes on the road. "Just trying to make a good impression, Claire. It's all part of the game, you know?" But it wasn't a game to me. It was our life, and these stunts were racking up not just charges, but doubts. Over the next few weeks, it became a pattern. Dinners, outings, even a weekend getaway, all on my dime under the guise of Mark's forgetfulness. Anna seemed to enjoy our company, always gracious, always cheerful, which only made it harder for me to voice my growing frustrations. Then, one afternoon at work, Anna pulled me aside. "Claire, I really appreciate the time with you and Mark. It's been a blast, honestly." Her sincerity was evident, but it only twisted the knife of guilt deeper. That same day, I was summoned to the director's office. Mr. Thompson, Anna's father, was a stern but fair man who had always treated me with respect. "Claire," he began, his voice softening, "I wanted to personally thank you. Anna's been through a lot lately, and your friendship has brought her back to life. It means more than you know." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "I'm glad I could be there for her, sir." Walking back to my desk, the weight of the situation settled in. This wasn't just about keeping up appearances or climbing the corporate ladder. Real emotions were involved, real lives. And here I was, stuck in the middle of a game I didn't sign up to play. It was just another Wednesday when Mark came home earlier than usual, a serious look plastered across his face that didn't bode well. I was still shuffling through some fabric samples for a client when he dropped the bombshell. "I quit my job today," he announced as if he were talking about the weather, not our financial lifeline. I stared at him, my hands frozen on a swatch of navy blue velvet. "You what? Mark, how are we supposed to manage? You know the rent here isn't exactly pocket change." He shrugged, a casual dismissal of my rising panic. "You're doing well, babe. We'll float on your income for a while." I need something better, something that fits my skills. I swallowed the knot in my throat, trying to process his nonchalance. Okay, but what's the plan until you find this dream job? We've got bills piling up, and not just small ones. Mark was already heading to the fridge, apparently more concerned with what was for dinner than our financial health. I'll start looking tomorrow. Don't worry, I've got this. But he didn't have this. Days turned into weeks, and weeks bled into months, with Mark leaving every morning under the guise of job interviews. Meanwhile, the reality of covering $3,000 a month in rent plus all our bills was beginning to take its toll on my savings and my stress levels. During this time, my friendship with Anna had continued to strengthen, a silver lining in the midst of my marital chaos. So, when she texted asking to meet for coffee, I welcomed the distraction. We sat in a cozy corner of Café Verona, a place that had become our go-to for unwinding. But today, Anna seemed off, her usual vibrancy dimmed by hesitation. Claire, I need to talk to you about something serious. Anna started, her fingers nervously twirling her coffee spoon. It's about Mark. My heart sank. This wasn't going to be good. He's been sending me messages, Anna continued, her voice a whisper. Romantic ones. And flowers, Claire. He sent flowers to my office. I felt a cold wave wash over me. What? Anna, that can't be right. Mark wouldn't. She pulled out her phone, her hands shaking as she showed me the screen. The messages were there in black and white, undeniable. Compliments, flirty emojis, and worse, declarations that he was ready to leave me for her. I don't want this, Claire. I value our friendship too much to let his infatuation ruin it. Anna's voice cracked with emotion. I've told him to stop, but he hasn't. I'm so sorry. The cafe around me blurred into insignificance as I tried to breathe through the betrayal. I can't believe this. Thank you for telling me, Anna. I need some time to think about what to do next. As I left the cafe, the crisp autumn air felt harsh against my skin. I walked aimlessly, lost in a storm of hurt and anger. How many mornings had he left with a kiss, claiming he was off to find a job when he was chasing a fantasy? How could he unravel our lives with such reckless disregard? As I walked back into our apartment, the air felt heavy, like it was saturated with all the lies and betrayal. Mark was sitting on the couch, the one I had meticulously chosen for our living room. He didn't even look up as I entered. What's going on, Mark? I asked, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. He finally glanced up, his expression cold and distant. You need to leave, he said bluntly, his words slicing through the tense air. I froze, confusion and anger swirling together. What are you talking about? Look, Claire, I've thought about this, he began, his tone harsh. My mom is moving in here tomorrow. You're just in the way now. I stared at him, speechless. This was not the man I married. He stood up, walking over to the desk and retrieving a stack of papers. I've signed these, he said, thrusting divorce papers at me. You should do the same. It's for the best. My hands trembled as I took the papers, the reality of his words slowly sinking in. Your mom? Why does she need to move in here? Mark scoffed. Because I'm going to be living with Anna soon. She's fallen for me, Claire. She's sending me messages, she loves me. And let's be real, she's a much better match for me financially than you ever were. I felt a hollow laugh rise in my throat, but I suppressed it. The irony was too bitter. Just an hour ago, Anna had confirmed it was all one-sided. But now wasn't the time to correct his delusions. Okay, Mark, I said calmly, masking the storm inside me. If that's what you want. I left him standing there, baffled by his audacity, and went to the spare room. That night, sleep was a stranger. I lay awake, planning my next steps, my mind racing faster than my heartbeat. At the crack of dawn, I was online, searching for a new apartment. By breakfast, I had signed a lease for a new place, a fresh start, a clean slate. I called the movers, scheduled for late morning. When the movers arrived, I directed them to the furniture, all of which I had paid for. Mark, hearing the commotion, came out of the bedroom, his face a mask of confusion. "Why are you taking the furniture?" he asked, his voice a mix of anger and disbelief. I pulled out a folder from my bag and flashed the receipts at him. "Because I bought it, Mark. You wanted me out, so I'm leaving. And I'm taking what's mine." The movers began to lift and move the furniture, filling the apartment with the sounds of motion and change. Mark stood there, silent now, watching as his plans unraveled piece by piece. Just as the last pieces were being loaded into the truck, Linda, my soon-to-be ex-mother-in-law, burst through the door with a suitcase in tow, her face flushed with expectation and confusion. "What the hell is going on here?" Linda barked, her eyes darting frantically from the nearly empty living room to the movers handling the furniture. I stood firm, clipboard in hand. "We're moving out the furniture. I'm leaving, Linda." She stomped her foot, a childish gesture that would have been comical if not for the situation. "Stop them. That's my son's furniture. You can't just take it." The movers paused, looking my way for instruction. I simply nodded, and they resumed their work, carrying a dining chair past her as she sputtered in disbelief. "How am I supposed to live here without any furniture?" Linda wailed, turning her wrath on Mark, who had just emerged from the bedroom, looking as if he'd been caught in a storm. "It's also good that you found yourself a richer girlfriend who will satisfy all our desires." I couldn't help but let out a laugh, though there was no humor in it. "Oh, Linda, you should know by now. Anna isn't interested in Mark. In fact, she's made it very clear she wants nothing to do with him." Mark's jaw dropped, a look of utter betrayal crossing his features. "Claire, I cut him off, stepping closer so only he could hear. "She told me everything, Mark. How you've been harassing her. She's even threatened to involve the police if you don't stop." Linda, overhearing part of the conversation, turned on her son with a fury I hadn't seen before. "You idiot. You could have kept Claire. At least she has a job, a career, something. She was our ticket." The irony of her words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Mark looked from his mother to me, desperation seeping into his expression. "Claire, please, can't we just talk about this? Maybe we can." "Talk?" I interrupted, my voice sharp. "After you handed me divorce papers? There's nothing left to discuss." Linda rounded on him again, her words a shrill, piercing through the now almost empty apartment. "You fool. She was the best thing you had." I turned away, the last few items being loaded behind me. With a deep, steadying breath, I addressed them both, my voice calm but resolute. "I've signed the papers, Linda. And I'll be filing them tomorrow. There's nothing here for me, not anymore." Settling into my new apartment was like taking a deep breath after being underwater for too long. The freedom to design my space without any compromises was exhilarating. I poured myself into every detail, choosing colors and textures that reflected my newfound independence and strength. The result was stunning, every inch of the place was a testament to my ability to rebuild and renew. As I was hanging the last piece of art, a vibrant abstract piece that seemed to pulse with energy, the phone rang. I glanced at the screen, it was Linda. "Claire, you need to come back." Linda's voice was desperate, tinged with something I guessed was regret. "We can't manage without you. The rent here, it's impossible, and Mark." I cut her off, my patience wearing thin. "Linda, I'm not part of your family anymore. You and Mark made that very clear. You'll have to figure it out just like I did." I ended the call and blocked her number without a second thought. The next day at work brought unexpected news. I was at my desk, reviewing fabric samples for a new project, when my phone buzzed. It was Mr. Thompson, the director. "Claire, could you come to my office? I have something important to discuss." Curiosity piqued, I made my way to his office, knocking lightly on the open door. "You wanted to see me, sir?" Mr. Thompson looked up, his face breaking into a broad smile. "Claire, please, come in. Have a seat." As I sat, he leaned forward, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "I heard about your recent win in the design competition. First place, Claire. That's fantastic." I couldn't help but smile, pride swelling in my chest. "Thank you, sir. It was a wonderful surprise." He nodded, then his expression turned more serious. "That's not the only reason I called you here. I've been watching your progress, your resilience and creativity, and I'd like you to head up our new branch. It's close to your new apartment, and honestly, I can't think of anyone better to lead it." The news took a moment to sink in. A promotion. A recognition of my hard work, completely on my merits, without any backroom deals or manipulations. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I'd be honored." Walking back to my desk, I felt lighter than I had in months. This was more than just a job promotion, it was a vindication of my choices and my integrity. Anna called that evening, her voice bubbling with excitement as she congratulated me on my promotion. "You totally deserve this, Claire. I knew you'd make it big." "Thanks, Anna. It means a lot, especially coming from you," I replied, grateful for her friendship and support. As we chatted about future plans and projects, I realized that despite everything, I had emerged not just intact but stronger, more confident in my abilities and my value. The past was just that, past. The future was bright, filled with possibilities and the promise of new beginnings, and I was ready to meet it head-on, with open arms and an open heart. I'm Sarah, a 30-year-old IT specialist, and I've been pretty much buried in my tech world at a large company. Life was about as predictable as it gets until a call from an old friend shook things up. It was about our high school reunion. I got there a bit late, thanks to a last-minute bug I had to squash at work, but the place was already buzzing with laughter and loud conversations. I recognized faces, now a little rounder or leaner, hairlines receding, and fashion senses, well, let's just say some were better left in the past. "Sarah, over here." Lisa, ever the loudmouth even back in school, waved from across the room. She hadn't changed a bit, still as flashy and flamboyant as ever. I made my way over, dodging a couple of overly enthusiastic greeters, and finally hugged her. "Lisa, you look, well, exactly like I remember. You still running the grapevine?" "You know it," she winked. "But hey, have you seen Mike yet?" "Mike?" I scanned the room and spotted him standing awkwardly by the snack table, not really talking to anyone. "What's with him? He looks miserable." Lisa leaned in, lowering her voice, despite the loud music. "Broke up with Jenna, again. But for real this time, it seems. You remember Jenna, right? Drama queen extraordinaire." "Oh, right," I nodded, remembering the explosive relationship those two had. "That rough, huh?" "Worse than a soap opera. She made a scene at his office last month. I heard she threw his phone out the window." We grabbed our drinks and mingled around, catching up with more people, laughing about old times, and listening to tales of who's doing what these days. As the night went on, I kept glancing over at Mike. He was mostly by himself, looking out of place among the laughing groups. Feeling a tug of compassion, I excused myself from a boring conversation about insurance premiums and walked over to him. "Hey, Mike. Long time, huh?" He looked up, a bit startled. "Sarah? Oh, hey, yeah, it's been a while. You look good. You know, if you ever need to talk or just hang out, I'm around. We used to be good at that, remember? Solving the world's problems one rant at a time." He managed a small smile. "Yeah, I remember. Thanks, Sarah." After the reunion, life sort of just plodded along for a week or so. I was back at my desk, buried under code and upcoming project deadlines. Honestly, I hadn't thought much about Mike or the reunion until my phone buzzed one evening while I was sprawled on the couch binge-watching some show. "Hey Sarah, it's Mike. Got a minute?" His voice sounded a bit hesitant. "Sure, Mike. What's up?" I muted the TV, my interest peaked. "I was just thinking about the other night at the reunion. We didn't really get much of a chance to catch up. How about we meet for coffee this weekend? Cafe Cornerstone. The rest of the week crawled by, but finally, Saturday came. I found Cafe Cornerstone nestled between a bookstore and a bakery. Its quaint setup with cozy nooks seemed ideal for long conversations. Mike was already there, seated at a back table with 2 coffees and a slightly anxious smile. "Hey, you made it," he stood up as I approached, pulling out a chair for me. "Hope you like caramel macchiato." "Thanks, and yeah, I love it." I settled into the chair, smiling at the gesture. "This is a nice spot, Mike." Feels hidden away from the world. We spent the next couple of hours just talking about random things, movies we liked, books we'd read, and some reminiscing about high school antics. It was easy, comfortable. Mike had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. As we were leaving the cafe, Mike turned to me. "Hey, Sarah, I had a really good time today. Would you maybe want to do this again next weekend? There's a little indie cinema nearby that's showing some classic films. Thought it might be fun." That second date led to a third and a fourth. Each time we met, it was like we picked up right where we left off. The more I got to know Mike, the more I realized how much I enjoyed his company. Only a year after Mike and I started dating, he popped the question. It wasn't anything fancy, no skywriting or flash mobs. We were just sitting on the couch, watching a movie when he turned to me during a commercial break, a serious look on his face. "Sarah, I've been thinking. We're pretty good together, aren't we?" I laughed. "Pretty good? I'd say better than good." He smiled, that easy smile that always made my heart skip. "How about we make it official then? Marry me?" Just like that. No dramatic kneeling, just him, me, and a very comfortable sofa. "Yes," I said without a moment's hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you." The wedding planning kicked off at full speed. We both wanted something small, nothing too over the top. Mike's parents were thrilled. They loved me, and honestly, I was pretty fond of them too. His mom, Martha, especially took to the planning like it was the royal wedding. One afternoon, we were at their place, flipping through catering menus and flower arrangements. Martha kept pushing for more lavish options. "Dear, are you sure you don't want the white doves? They make for such splendid photos." "Martha, I think we'll pass on the doves. Maybe just some nice centerpieces?" I suggested, trying to keep things simple. Mike's dad, Harold, leaned over and whispered to me, "Don't let her bully you into anything too fancy." "It's your day, Sarah." I nodded, grateful for the backup. The warnings came from Lisa, of all people. We were out for drinks one night, a little break from all the wedding madness. She still had that knack for stirring up trouble, or at least trying to sniff it out. "So, Sarah, everything's going smooth with Mike, huh? He's really turned over a new leaf?" I sipped my drink, a bit wary of where she was heading. "Yeah, he's great." "Why?" "No reason. Just, his track record wasn't exactly stellar." "You really think he's changed?" I frowned. "Lisa, he's not his past. People change." "Sure, they do. But sometimes they change back. Just saying, keep your eyes open, girl." The wedding day arrived faster than I could have imagined. It was a perfect sunny day, not too hot, not too cold. The venue was a small garden, lush green with flowers everywhere, just as I had wanted. Simple, beautiful, not overrun with doves or anything too extravagant. The ceremony was a blur of vows, smiles, and a few tears, happy ones. At the reception, Mike's parents both hugged me, almost crushing me between them. "Welcome to the family, dear," Martha whispered, her eyes moist. "We're so glad it's you." Harold gave me a firm nod. "Good to have you officially on board, Sarah." We left the reception under a shower of rice, laughing as we dodged the playful throws from our friends and family. As we drove off to start our new life together, I felt hopeful. Life as a newlywed started off like a dream. Mike and I were in that honeymoon phase where everything seemed perfect, where dinners were candlelit every night, and weekends were long, lazy stretches of shared smiles and slow dances in our living room. But as months rolled on, I started to notice small changes, the kind of stuff that nibbles at the edge of your happiness without fully announcing itself. One night, I was clearing up after dinner, and Mike was on his laptop, which had gradually become a common scene. "Hey, Mike, wanna watch that new action movie tonight? Heard it's good." He didn't look up. "Nah, I've got tons to do. Maybe another time." It wasn't just the brushed-off movie plans. It was him coming home later and later, his side of the bed cold when I'd try to snuggle up, him being there but not really being there. One evening, after he had missed another dinner, I decided to confront him when he walked in at nearly midnight. "Mike, we need to talk. Is everything okay at work? You've been coming home so late." He sighed, tossing his keys on the table with more force than necessary. "It's just work, Sarah. We're slammed. You know how it is." "I get that, but it feels like you're always tired, always busy. I miss spending time with you." "Don't start, alright? I'm not in the mood for this tonight." He brushed past me, heading to our bedroom. That stung. I followed him, not ready to let it go. "Not in the mood? When are you ever in the mood to talk these days, Mike?" He paused, the anger in his eyes softening a bit. "Just going through a rough patch. It'll get better." I wanted to believe him, so I did. We went to bed that night, with unresolved tensions hanging between us like thick smoke. Things didn't get better, though. The cycle continued. Mike would be attentive and sweet for a few days, and then distant for weeks. It wore on me, the constant up and down. One afternoon, I tried a different tactic. I booked us a table at our favorite cafe, thinking a change of scenery might help. "Mike, let's go out today. Just us, like old times." He hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, sure." At the cafe, I tried to lighten the mood. "Remember when we first came here? You spilled coffee all over yourself trying to impress me with your latte art skills." He cracked a smile, finally looking at me. "Yeah, that was a disaster. Gave up on being a barista after that." We laughed, and for a moment, it felt like we'd turned a corner. But halfway through dessert, his phone buzzed, and whatever wall had come down went right back up. He checked the message and stood abruptly. "I've got to go back to work. Something's come up." "Right now? It's Saturday, Mike. I don't control the timing, Sarah. I'm sorry, I have to handle this." There was a hardness in his voice that didn't sit well with me. I watched him leave, the half-eaten dessert a silent witness to another failed attempt. I sat there a long while, thinking about Lisa's warning, about how people change back sometimes. The past few months had been a roller coaster. One minute, Mike was the sweet guy, attentive and full of surprises. Next thing I knew, he was cold, buried in work, and coming home later each night. That evening was no different, or so I thought until he walked through the door with a scratch clawing down his face. "What happened to your face?" I asked, my voice sharp, cutting through the silence of our living room. Mike flinched, a little startled by my directness. "It's nothing. Had a bit of a mishap on the road. Almost collided with a car." I stared at him, trying to piece together the scene. "And that got you scratched?" He sighed, shifting uncomfortably. "Yeah, the other driver, a woman, she freaked out. We argued, and she scratched me." I crossed my arms, leaning against the kitchen counter. "Really? That sounds kinda wild, Mike." He avoided my eyes, focusing instead on a loose thread on his sleeve. "I swear, that's what happened." Something about his tone didn't sit right with me. It wasn't just the scratch or the implausible story, it was the way he was acting, edgy, defensive. We'd had our issues lately, sure. He'd even thrown out that I was too calm, too boring. That had hurt, more than I'd let on, leading to more arguments than I could count. But this was different. You expect me to believe that? After the way things have been between us? I pressed, needing more than just his awkward excuses. Sarah, please, I don't want to fight. He finally met my gaze, his face a mix of frustration and pleading. I shook my head, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. Neither do I, Mike. But you come home looking like you've been in a bar fight, and you tell me it was some random woman on the road? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of pure frustration. Yes, that's exactly what happened. Why is that so hard to believe? Because it's you, Mike. Because one day you're sweet and caring, and the next, you're this distant guy who stays late at work and comes home with scratches. He stepped forward, his expression softening. I know it's been rough, I know I've been off. But I'm telling you the truth. Let's not go down this road. I wanted to believe him, really, I did. Part of me wanted to wrap my arms around him, to make everything okay with a hug like I used to. But another part, a growing part, couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. Mike, I want to believe you. I do. But something's got to give. We can't keep going like this. He nodded slowly. I know. I'll try harder. We'll get past this, I promise. I wanted to end the night there, to say it was all okay and fall into bed together like we used to. But I couldn't. Instead, I just nodded, the promise hanging in the air, fragile and thin. He looked relieved, maybe even a little hopeful. Thank you, Sarah. I love you, you know that, right? I know, I replied, the words automatic. I love you too. But as he walked away to clean up his face, and I turned back to the dishes, the doubt remained, gnawing at me. Love wasn't supposed to be this hard, was it? Not if it was real, not if it was right. A week before our wedding anniversary, which I had planned to celebrate with a romantic candlelit dinner, disaster struck. I was crossing the road near my workplace when suddenly, a car came out of nowhere. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a hospital bed, pain throbbing through my ankle and my head spinning. The doctors did a bunch of tests, a CT scan, and X-rays, and concluded I had a dislocated ankle along with the concussion. They decided to keep me in the hospital for a week to monitor my condition. Once I was somewhat alert, I called Mike. His phone rang a few times before he picked up. Hey, what's up? He answered, his voice sounding rushed. Mike, I'm in the hospital, I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the swirling pain and confusion. What? What happened? He sounded concerned, finally. I got hit by a car. It's bad, but not too bad. I'm okay, sort of. I have a concussion and a dislocated ankle. They're keeping me here for a week. There was a pause on the line, then. Oh, wow, Sarah, look, I can't talk right now. I'm at the airport. Airport? Why? I had to leave for a business trip, urgently. I won't be back for 2 weeks. His words felt like another blow, this time to my heart. What? Mike, our anniversary is in a few days. Why didn't you tell me about this trip? It came up last minute. Sorry, I really can't talk now. You're distracting me, Sarah. Then he just hung up. I was left holding the phone, stunned and alone. Tears welled up in my eyes, not just from the pain in my body, but from the sharp ache in my chest. I called my mother-in-law, and she came to the hospital with some clothes and hygiene products. I don't understand, why didn't Mike tell me he was going away? I asked her as she helped me settle in. She looked troubled, her hands fussing more with the blanket than necessary. I don't know, dear. He didn't tell us much either. But don't worry, everything will be fine. After she left, I lay there, staring at the sterile hospital ceiling, the beeps of machines around me. I couldn't just lie there and do nothing. I needed answers. I picked up my phone again and called Mike's office. His boss, Greg, who had always been friendly with me, answered the phone. Hey, Sarah, how are you doing? Not great, Greg. I'm in the hospital, Listen, I need to ask you something. What business trip is Mike on? He said it was urgent. There was a pause, then, business trip? Sarah, Mike isn't on a business trip. He took a personal leave for 2 weeks. Said he needed some time off, no details given. I hung up, the cold realization settling in. Mike lied. He wasn't on a business trip. He had left on purpose, right before our anniversary, and right when I ended up in the hospital. I needed to talk to someone who might know more, so I called Lisa, my classmate who knew everything about everyone. Hey, Lisa, it's Sarah. Listen, have you heard anything about Mike recently? There was a brief pause. You sure you want to know? Just spill it, I pressed, bracing myself. Okay, well, he's been seen around with Jenna again. You know, the ex. And not just friendly meetups, if you catch my drift. Everything started to make sense, the mood swings, his sudden disinterest, and the scratches. It wasn't just random stress, it was Jenna's drama pulling him back in. I was still processing this when my phone rang. It was Mike. Sarah, babe, I need your help. Help? My voice was icy. What kind of trouble are you in now, Mike? We're in Mexico, Jenna and I. We got into a fight, and it got out of hand. We're detained by the police. I couldn't help but laugh, bitter and sharp. You're in jail? You skipped our anniversary, left me alone while I'm in a hospital, to go to Mexico with her? And now you want my help? Sarah, please, this is serious. We need money for a lawyer, and there's a huge fine. The audacity of his request after everything was astounding. No, Mike. You made your bed. Now lie in it. I said, cutting him off mid-plea. I called his parents next, needing them to understand the gravity of their son's choices. Mom, it's Sarah. I need to tell you about Mike. His mom, always kind and understanding, listened as I explained the situation. By the end, her voice was heavy with disappointment. I can't believe he would do this. His father and I. We won't help him this time. He needs to learn. After hanging up, I lay back on my pillow, staring at the sterile white ceiling, feeling the finality of everything wash over me. Mike and I were done. The love I had for him, the life I thought we were building, it was all based on illusions, fragile and fleeting as morning mist. The next few days in the hospital gave me time to think about what I wanted next. Without the constant drama and heartache, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't realized was missing. It was over with Mike, and that was okay. It had to be. A week after I got out of the hospital, I was adjusting to the quiet of my own home when Mike unexpectedly showed up at the door. He looked thin and worn out, a far cry from the man who had flown to Mexico, and his face twisted with anger the moment he saw me. You left me to rot in that jail, he burst out as soon as I opened the door. How could you do that to me? I couldn't help but laugh, not because it was funny, but because of the absurdity of it all. Me? Leave you? Mike, you dug that hole all by yourself. And just so you know, I'm filing for divorce. And yes, I will be seeking compensation for your betrayal. His face went pale, the anger shifting to panic. You can't do that, Sarah. We can sort this out. Sort this out? There's nothing left to sort, Mike. You've done enough. I was calm, more composed than I thought possible given the circumstances. I had gotten in touch with a lawyer the day I left the hospital. By then, she had already reached out to the Mexican authorities. They were surprisingly cooperative, providing all the necessary evidence of Mike's infidelity, including a signed statement from both him and Jenna about their relationship. Seeing Mike's desperation, I felt a mixture of pity and resolve. You should have thought about sorting things out before you decided to cheat and lie, Mike. It's over. But, Sarah, No buts. It's done. My lawyer has everything. The police, the testimonies, the photos, all of it. Mike slumped against the doorframe, defeated. What about us? Our marriage? It ended the moment you decided to betray it. There's no us anymore, Mike. Only me and what I decide to do next. And right now, I decide to move on. With that, I closed the door on him, literally and metaphorically. Over the next few weeks, the divorce proceedings moved quickly, thanks to the overwhelming evidence. I received a substantial settlement, not as a victory but as a compensation for the betrayal and the upheaval it caused in my life. I moved out of our shared home, finding a new place where I could start fresh. It was smaller, but it was mine, filled only with things and memories I chose. Lisa, ever the source of local news, kept me updated on Mike's situation. He was still with Jenna, and their relationship was as tumultuous as ever. They're always fighting, always making a scene. Police have been called a few times already, she told me one afternoon over coffee. Let them have each other, I said, sipping my latte. I'm better off. I'm back at work, diving into projects. I'm building my career, Lisa. On my terms. As for Mike, his life continued to spiral. His parents, once so warm and welcoming, had distanced themselves, disapproving of his choices and the chaos that followed him. His work suffered too, and eventually, he was let go due to his erratic behavior and poor performance. Sitting in my new living room, surrounded by boxes yet to be unpacked, I felt a sense of peace. The past months had been a whirlwind, a time of pain and revelation, but also of growth and newfound freedom. I was starting over, but this time with more wisdom, more resilience. I was free from the deceit, free from the drama. It was just me, my work, and a future that looked brighter by the day. As I set up my new space, every picture I hung and every book I shelved was a testament to my new beginning, to my ability to rebuild and flourish. I'm Emily, and I work as a child psychologist. Ever since I was little, I've had two loves, my dad and books. My dad, George, runs a big publishing house, and I practically grew up in those stacks of manuscripts and the smell of fresh ink. Life's funny that way, sticking you right where you belong from the start. Every month, like clockwork, I'd tag along with Dad to his office. It was our thing, end of the work week, and we'd grab dinner after, just him and me. That particular Friday started no different. The office buzzed with the usual energy of deadlines and last-minute deals. I was sitting in Dad's office, flipping through a manuscript that was probably too old for me, when he walked in with someone. Emily, this here is Jacob. He's got a knack for stories, but hasn't found his rhythm yet. Dad introduced us. Jacob was a bit rough around the edges, jeans, a bit scruffy, but his smile was something else. He carried a manuscript under his arm, clearly well handled, with dog-eared pages sticking out. Nice to meet you, Emily. Heard a lot about you. Your dad can't stop bragging about his brilliant daughter, Jacob said, extending his hand. I shook it, feeling a little flush. Nice to meet you too. Hope Dad's not overselling me. We laughed, and Dad clapped his hands, pleased. I'll leave you two to chat. Emily, why don't you show Jacob around? Might do him good to see the place through someone who loves it as much as you do. As we walked through the corridors, I could feel Jacob's curiosity peeking at every corner. So, you really like coming here? Doesn't it get, I dunno, boring? Not really, I shrugged. Each book is like a new world. Isn't that what drew you to writing? He chuckled, running a hand through his hair. Yeah, something like that. But it's tough, you know? Trying to make a living out of worlds in your head. We ended up in the cafeteria, and I bought us 2 coffees. As we sat, Jacob's gaze was pensive, his fingers drumming on the table. You ever think about writing yourself? You know so much about this stuff. Maybe, I admitted, sipping my coffee. But right now, I'm more into helping kids. They've got their own stories, you know? Makes sense, Jacob nodded. Hey, thanks for showing me around, Emily. Feels less intimidating now. As we walked back to Dad's office, something about Jacob's hopeful, almost vulnerable look struck me. Maybe it was his determination or just his easy way of talking. Whatever it was, I found myself wanting to see him succeed. Driving home later, Dad couldn't stop talking about Jacob. There's something about that boy. Reminds me of myself when I started out. Raw, but something golden there. I smiled, looking out the window, the city lights blurring by. Yeah, Dad. I think he'll make it. Little did I know, that day wasn't just another end of the week. It was the beginning of everything, of love, of dreams, of the twisted roads we'd soon walk. After Jacob and I got married, life took a turn, not just sideways, but upside down. His books weren't selling. Money was tight, and tensions were high. I started running after-school clubs and taking extra shifts, anything to make ends meet. We were living on dreams and instant noodles, pretty much. One evening, after a particularly long day, I found Jacob slumped over his desk, papers scattered around like the aftermath of a storm. He looked up at me, his eyes hollow. I don't know if I can do this anymore, Em. Maybe I'm not cut out for writing, he muttered, shuffling through his failed manuscript pages. Sitting beside him, I grabbed his hand. Look, everyone hits a rough patch. Maybe you just need a fresh pair of eyes, or a new angle. He scoffed, almost bitterly. And what? Start writing kiddie books? Why not? I challenged. You're good at making up stories, and kids love that stuff. Plus, I can help. I know what kids like, remember? The next day, I talked to Dad about it. We were in his office, the usual clutter of books and manuscripts surrounding us. Dad, Jacob's struggling with his books. What if he tried writing for children? I ventured, hoping it didn't sound as desperate as I felt. George, ever the pragmatist, leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. It's a tough market, Em. But it might be his only shot. I'll give him a tip or two, see what he can whip up. So, we started. Our dining table turned into a brainstorming hub. I'd throw ideas at Jacob, and he'd run with them, his typewriter clacking away into the night. Hey, what about a story of a little boy who builds a rocket from cardboard boxes and goes to Mars? I suggested one evening, excited by the thought. Jacob looked up from his typewriter. And what, he fights aliens, or discovers a new planet? No, it's about his adventure, the friends he makes along the way. Keep it simple, relatable, I explained, trying to steer him towards empathy rather than action. Could work. Kids like that adventurous stuff, right? Jacob mused, warming up to the idea. Months of trial and error followed. We wrote together, scrapped ideas, and argued over characters and plots. It was messy, frustrating, and absolutely wonderful. One morning, Jacob slid a finished manuscript across the table to me. Read it. It's called Tommy's Trip to Mars. Think it'll fly? I read it, cover to cover, and looked up, finding his anxious gaze. It's perfect. It's going to soar, not just fly. Jacob's first children's book did more than just soar, it skyrocketed. One night, as we celebrated the news of his first sold-out book signing, Jacob pulled me close, his breath warm against my ear. Couldn't have done it without you, Em. This is all you. I laughed, a bit tipsy from the champagne and the joy. It's all us, babe. We're in this together, remember? That night, as we fell asleep, our hands entwined, the weight in my chest felt lighter. We were making it, together. It felt like we'd conquered the world, with just a typewriter and a handful of dreams. Life's got a funny way of giving you exactly what you need when you least expect it. After Jacob's book took off, things started looking up, but it wasn't the book sales or the newfound stability that changed everything. It was the day we found out I was pregnant. I remember telling Jacob. It was a chilly evening, and he was at his desk, sketches and notes scattered around like always. I walked over, holding the test behind my back. Jacob, I've got news, I said, trying to sound casual. He didn't look up, just kept scribbling. Yeah? What's up? Big news, I emphasized, now waving the pregnancy test like a white flag. That caught his attention. He glanced up, saw the stick in my hand, and his face went white, then red, then a weird mix of both. "Are you serious? Are we?" "Yep, we're going to be parents," I grinned, my heart hammering in my chest. He got up so fast, his chair almost toppled over. Coming over, he hugged me, tight, like he'd never let go. This is amazing." And it was. Those 9 months flew by in a haze of preparations, doctor's appointments, and Jacob turning our spare room into the perfect nursery. He'd often stand in the doorway, paintbrush or wallpaper in hand, and say something like, "Do you think the baby will like stars or moons better on the ceiling?" I'd laugh, watching him fuss. "Babe, as long as the room is warm and the crib doesn't squeak, our baby will sleep just fine under either." When Sophie was born, it was like our little world finally felt complete. Holding her for the first time, I felt a love so fierce, it almost scared me. Jacob was the same, he'd hover around her like she was the most precious thing. Which, of course, she was. Balancing motherhood with helping Jacob wasn't easy. I'd often work on book ideas or read drafts while Sophie napped. Jacob and I spent countless nights discussing plots and characters in hushed tones over her crib. "Hey, what if the next book is about a little girl who finds a magic seashell?" I whispered one night while Sophie slept. Jacob, looking at our daughter, smiled softly. "That's perfect. She could hear the ocean, or better yet, it grants wishes." I nodded, scribbling the idea down. Simple and sweet. Kids will love it. Time passed in a blur of book signings and bedtime stories. Sophie grew, and so did Jacob's career, but we made sure our family time was sacred. Sunday mornings were ours, pancakes and pajamas, no work talk allowed. One Sunday, as we were all in the kitchen, Jacob flipping pancakes and me setting the table, Sophie tugged at my leg. "Mommy, can I help Daddy?" I lifted her up and set her on the counter where Jacob could see her. "Sure, sweetie. Daddy could use a good sous chef." Jacob handed her a small spoon. "Okay, boss, tell me where to flip next." Watching them, a feeling of contentment washed over me. This was it. The dream wasn't just the books or the recognition, it was this. Family. Laughter over spilled syrup and Sophie's delighted claps when a pancake landed just right. 20 years of marriage had flown by in a whirlwind of pages and print. With Jacob's writing career in full bloom, thanks to my ghostwriting and his charm in interviews, we had built a comfortable life. I had left my job long ago, pouring my energy into our home, our daughter Sophie, and the books that bore Jacob's name but carried my spirit. That evening, we were at a grand celebration for Dad's 70th birthday at a chic restaurant, a mingling hub of relatives and Dad's publishing colleagues. The atmosphere was vibrant, the clinking of glasses and the murmur of conversations, creating a lively backdrop. I kept close to Sophie, who, at 17, was more interested in her phone than the gathering. Occasionally, my eyes strayed across the room where Jacob was, inevitably drawn to his magnetic presence. Tonight, however, he seemed preoccupied, his attention consistently captured by a young woman with an effortless elegance that made her stand out even in the crowded room. "Who's that with Jacob?" I found myself asking Dad as we stood by the buffet, my eyes discreetly pointing towards the duo. "Oh, that's Laura. She's the new assistant editor at the firm. Been quite helpful to Jacob with his recent projects," Dad explained, his voice indifferent, lost in the normalcy of work relationships. I nodded, a tight smile concealing the churn of unease. "Seems like they've got a lot to talk about." Dad patted my shoulder, his attention already snagging on another arriving guest. "Work's work, Em. He's probably just discussing book stuff. Don't think too much into it." The rest of the evening saw me floating from one group to another, laughter peppering my conversations, yet my gaze involuntarily tracking Jacob's movements. He laughed at something Laura said, his hand lightly touching her back, and my heart sank into an uncomfortable place. Sophie tugged at my sleeve, her eyes rolling. "Can we go yet? This is super boring, and all these old people keep asking about college." "Just a little longer, honey. It's Grandpa's big day." I reminded her, squeezing her hand, trying to drink in her youthful discontent to distract myself from the hollow feeling growing inside me. As the party wore on, the image of Jacob and Laura together became etched into my mind, a nagging reminder that things in perfect-looking gardens aren't always what they seem. I watched them, telling myself it was nothing, just work. But the little voice in my head wasn't buying it. It whispered doubts, seeded suspicions that no amount of rationalizing could quell. The evening air was chilly as the party for Dad's 70th birthday wound down. After hours of forced smiles and chit-chat, all I wanted was a moment to myself, a quick escape to the restroom before heading home. As I navigated the dimly lit corridor, a muffled giggle stopped me in my tracks. The sound wasn't just familiar, it was intimate, a sound that sends chills down your spine when you know it shouldn't be coming from your husband. Peeking around the corner, my heart sank. There was Jacob, his arms wrapped around Laura, the young assistant editor he'd supposedly been just working with. They were tucked in a secluded corner, far from the prying eyes of the partygoers, lost in an embrace that left no room for doubt. I froze, the sight striking me like a bolt of lightning. My stomach twisted into knots as I watched them kiss, a long, passionate kiss that seemed to last forever. The betrayal stung, sharp and deep, as I stumbled back, hiding behind a decorative screen. The laughter and music from the party seemed a world away. Their whispers floated over to me, words that twisted the knife further. "Soon, we'll be happy, just a little longer," Jacob murmured to her, his voice low and eager. Laura responded, her voice a sugary poison. "And then you can leave her, right?" "Yeah, just a bit longer," he whispered back. "I've been sick of her for years. Soon, we won't have to hide." I slipped away quietly, my legs shaky as I made my way to the bathroom to splash water on my face, trying to wash away the shock and the hurt. Looking at my reflection in the mirror, I hardly recognized the woman staring back at me. Betrayed. Deceived. Made a fool of. When I stepped out, attempting to compose myself, I nearly ran into Dad. His face clouded with concern at the sight of me. "Emily, what's wrong? You look pale as a ghost," he said, his hand on my arm steadying me. I couldn't hold it in any longer. The words tumbled out, messy and raw. "It's Jacob. He's having an affair with Laura. I saw them just now, and they were talking about leaving me once he makes enough money from his next book." Dad's expression hardened, his jaw setting in anger. "First thing tomorrow, we're going to see a detective. We'll get to the bottom of this," he said, a protective fierceness in his tone. "Let's get you and Sophie home. You shouldn't be here a minute longer." Leaving the party, the night air felt even colder, biting as the reality of the situation sunk in. Sophie, oblivious to the storm brewing, chatted about the evening, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying Jacob's betrayal over and over. Jacob didn't come home that night, claiming another late night at work. I knew better now. I lay in bed, the emptiness echoing in the room, planning my next steps. The morning after Dad's birthday bash was a rough start. Dad had arranged for us to meet with a private investigator, Mr. Hammond, who had helped him with some minor publishing fraud cases in the past. When we arrived, Mr. Hammond greeted us with a nod, his office a clutter of files and old newspapers. "George, Emily, what can I do for you today?" His voice was gruff, seasoned by years of digging into other people's dirt. "It's my husband, Jacob. I think he's having an affair," I said, trying to keep my voice steady but feeling it waver under the weight of the words. Mr. Hammond didn't look surprised. Perhaps in his line of work, such revelations were as common as morning coffee. "All right, tell me everything. The more details, the better I can help you." I spilled it all, the party, the overheard conversation, his secretive behaviors over the past months, and his late nights explained away by work that seemed to never end. Dad sat beside me, his face a mask of fury and concern. Mr. Hammond listened, jotting down notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen against his desk. "I can start looking into this immediately. Surveillance, checking financials, the usual drill. But it will take a few weeks to gather enough evidence." We got the call to come into Mr. Hammond's office on a gloomy Tuesday morning. Walking into his office, the air felt thick with the weight of what was about to be disclosed. Mr. Hammond didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I found quite a bit," he said gruffly, motioning us to sit before he started laying out the evidence he had compiled. First came the photos, Jacob and Laura, not just working late but intimately dining out, walking in the park, entering her apartment, too many moments that they spent wrapped up in each other, far from innocent. Then he handed over a stack of financial statements and receipts. "Your husband has been quite generous with your joint funds," Mr. Hammond said dryly. There were bank transactions showing large sums transferred to Laura's accounts, purchase documents for an upscale apartment in her name, and even a receipt for a new car, gifts from Jacob. As if that wasn't enough, Mr. Hammond played several audio clips of conversations between Jacob and Laura. Their voices, hushed and excited, discussed not just their affair, but future plans. They talked about getting married once my daughter Sophie was old enough, calculating that it would minimize any alimony payments. Mr. Hammond cleared his throat, bringing my attention back to him. "There's enough here to file for divorce, and not just any divorce, one that will favor you heavily given the circumstances. He broke the trust, and the law has provisions for situations like this." The weekend had finally come, the one where everything was supposed to come crashing down. Dad had concocted a plan, inviting Jacob and his mistress, Laura, to his house under the guise of discussing a new book project. They arrived together, Jacob looking confident as ever, Laura slightly uneasy by his side. The moment he saw me standing there in the living room, his face dropped, and panic flickered in his eyes. He made a move as if to leave, but Dad's stern voice stopped him. "Sit down, Jacob. We're not done here," Dad commanded, pointing to the chairs strategically placed in front of his desk. Reluctantly, Jacob and Laura sat down, the former still glancing towards the door, as if calculating his chances. Dad then pulled out a folder, thick with the weight of evidence collected over the past weeks by the private investigator. He laid it on the table and slowly began to pull out photographs, one by one, laying them out like a deck of cards that spelled Jacob's downfall. "These could make for an interesting book, don't you think?" Dad said, his voice calm but with a sharp edge. "A tale of deceit, betrayal, all backed by these lovely photos and documents. What a story it would make, published for the whole world to see." Jacob's complexion turned a shade paler with each piece of evidence displayed. He started to speak, a feeble attempt to explain himself, but Dad cut him off, pulling out more receipts, bills, checks, all painting a clear picture of the double life Jacob had been leading. Dad continued, his disappointment and anger resonant in his voice. "Remember how you got here, Jacob? Emily wrote those first books that still bring in money. She's been behind you, supporting you, and this is how you repay her?" As he spoke, Laura, sitting beside Jacob, began to sob quietly, her hands trembling. Amidst her tears, she whispered, almost too low for me to hear, "I'm pregnant." I walked over to Jacob with the divorce papers I had prepared. "Sign these," I said firmly, pushing the documents toward him. "You're leaving with nothing. The house, the savings, the rights to the books, all stay with me." Laura looked up, her eyes wide with fear. I turned to her, my voice cold but clear. "And you, I will sue if you don't give up the car and any money Jacob gave you. You can keep the apartment, I'm leaving it to you out of pity for your condition." She nodded frantically, wiping her tears, and quickly agreed, signing whatever I put in front of her. Jacob tried to protest, his voice shaky. "This isn't fair. I deserve..." Before he could finish, Dad picked up his phone and held it up. "Shall I call my friends at the publishing houses, Jacob? How about the major bookstore chains? Let's see how your career will develop in the future." Seeing no way out, Jacob's resistance crumbled. He signed the papers, his hand trembling as he did so. With each stroke of his pen, my future started clearing from the fog of betrayal. The dust had settled, and the silence of the house seemed to echo louder than ever. It was just me now, and Sophie, who was away at college, leaving me to the quiet that wrapped around the rooms like a thick blanket. The finality of it all hadn't fully sunk in yet, the divorce papers signed and delivered, Jacob a part of my past, and my new life waiting to be shaped. I began by taking down every last photograph that included Jacob, replacing them with artwork that Sophie and I had picked out together, and photos of my friends, family, and the many kids I'd helped as a psychologist. One afternoon, Dad came over. "So, what's the plan now? You going back to work, or got something else in mind?" I paused, a book in hand, and turned to him. "I've been thinking about that. I want to write, Dad. Not just ghostwrite, but really write, my name on the books this time." "That's my girl," Dad said proudly, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "What about?" "Children's books. But this time, stories that deal with real feelings, challenges kids face growing up. I've seen enough in my practice to know what's missing out there," I explained, excited by the idea that was slowly taking shape in my mind. The following weeks were a blur of activity. I started outlining ideas, jotting down story arcs in the early hours of the morning when the world was quiet, and my thoughts were loud. One evening, Sophie called. She'd been my rock, her calls filled with encouragement and her own college adventures. "Hey, Mom, how's the book coming along?" "It's actually going great, sweetie. It's like once I started, I couldn't stop. I've already outlined 3 stories," I shared, the excitement in my voice mirrored by hers. "That's awesome. I can't wait to read them. And Mom, I'm proud of you, you know? Not many could bounce back like you have." Her words warmed my heart, a reminder of how far I'd come. "Thanks, honey. That means a lot. I think it's going to be something special." As the months passed, the book took shape, a tangible symbol of my new life. It was filled with tales of courage, understanding, and growth, lessons I'd learned the hard way but was now sharing through characters that children could look up to and learn from. On the day the first copy of my book arrived, I held it in my hands, the title gleaming under my name, Emily Martin. It was more than just a book, it was a testament to my journey, to the resilience of the human spirit, and to a future filled with promise. My name is Andrea, and I've been a professional massage therapist for over a decade now. For the past 8 years, I've also been a wife, though sometimes I wonder if that role suits me as well as my career does. I'm 35, with dark hair that's usually tied back in a practical ponytail, and hands that have become strong and skilled from years of working on tense muscles. I specialize in sports massage, helping athletes recover from injuries and improve their performance. It's demanding work, but I love the challenge. There's something deeply satisfying about feeling the knots in someone's muscles give way under my fingers, knowing I'm helping them heal and reach their full potential. My husband, Tom, doesn't quite get it. He's 37, works as an office clerk, and his idea of a good time is lounging on the couch with a beer, watching whatever game is on TV. He's not a bad guy, really. Just different from me. "Andrea, why don't you take a break?" Tom called from the living room as I pored over my accounts one evening. "Come watch the game with me." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "I can't, Tom. I'm trying to figure out how much more I need to save for the office space." He appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with a slight frown. "You're always working. We should be enjoying life, not killing ourselves for some future that might never come." "This is important to me," I said, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. "I want my own business, my own space. I'm tired of working for other people." This was a familiar dance between us. We'd reached a compromise of sorts over the years. We each contributed a set amount to our shared expenses, and whatever was left was ours to spend, or save, as we saw fit. It wasn't perfect, but it allowed me to squirrel away money for my future business without constant arguments. The apartment we lived in was a wedding gift from my father. It wasn't large, but it was in a good neighborhood and, most importantly, it was ours free and clear. No mortgage meant I could focus on saving for my business instead of paying for a roof over our heads. The next morning, I was up early as usual, preparing for another long day of appointments at the 2 clinics where I worked. As I sipped my coffee, Tom stumbled into the kitchen, bleary-eyed and yawning. "You're up early," he mumbled, reaching for the coffee pot. "Oh, by the way, my mom called yesterday. She and Sarah want to book a wellness course with you." I froze, my mug halfway to my lips. My mother-in-law, Evelyn, and her daughter, Tom's sister, Sarah were, well, let's just say they weren't my favorite people. "Did you tell them I'd do it?" Tom looked surprised. "Of course. Why wouldn't you? They're family." I bit back a sigh. This was going to be a problem, I could feel it. But I forced a smile and nodded. "Right. Family. I'll fit them in somewhere." The day Evelyn and Sarah came for their wellness course was the beginning of a nightmare I couldn't have anticipated. They sauntered into my clinic like they owned the place, designer handbags swinging from their arms. "Andrea, darling," Evelyn's voice was saccharine sweet. "We're so excited for our spa day." I forced a smile. "It's not exactly a spa day, Evelyn. This is a therapeutic massage course." Sarah rolled her eyes. "Same difference. Let's get started, shall we? I have a hair appointment later." I gritted my teeth and led them to the treatment room. For the next 2 hours, I worked on relieving Evelyn's chronic back pain and Sarah's tension headaches. I used every technique in my arsenal, determined to give them the best possible treatment despite their attitude. As we finished up, Evelyn stretched languidly. "Oh, that was lovely. We'll have to do this again soon." "Great," I said, reaching for my appointment book. "When would you like to schedule your next session?" "It will cost." "Andrea," Evelyn cut me off, her voice suddenly cold. "We're family. Surely you're not expecting us to pay for this?" My jaw dropped. What? Of course, I expect payment. This is my job, Evelyn." "Well, I never," Evelyn huffed. "Tom will hear about this." "Come on, Sarah." They swept out of the clinic, leaving me stunned and angry. I knew I should have seen this coming, but their audacity still caught me off guard. That night, I confronted Tom about it. "Your mother and sister came in for treatments today," I began, trying to keep my voice level. "They refused to pay." Tom looked up from his phone, surprised. "Well, maybe you should have just given it to them as a gift. They are family, after all." The following weeks brought more frustrations. Evelyn started calling regularly, complaining about various aches and pains, hinting heavily that I should help out. Sarah took to dropping by unannounced on weekends, kids in tow. "Andrea, be a dear and watch the kids for a few hours," she'd say, already halfway out the door. "I've got a mani-pedi appointment." I tried to protest, to set boundaries, but Tom always sided with them. "They're family," he'd say, as if that explained and excused everything. One Saturday, after Sarah had once again left her children with me without warning, I confronted Tom. "This has to stop," I said firmly. "I'm not a free babysitter or on-call masseuse. You need to talk to your sister." Tom's face darkened. "Andrea, they're my family. I expect you to be loyal and obedient. That's what a good wife does." I stared at him, really seeing him for perhaps the first time in our marriage. This man, who I'd loved for 8 years, didn't understand me at all. He didn't support my dreams, didn't respect my work. To him, I was just an extension of his family, expected to fall in line with their demands. The following weeks were a blur of work and tension at home. I threw myself into my job, working longer hours at the clinics and squirreling away every penny I could. Tom and I barely spoke, the silence between us growing heavier with each passing day. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, I received a call that shattered my world. My father had passed away suddenly in his sleep. The phone slipped from my numb fingers as the news washed over me like a tidal wave of grief. I don't remember much of the next few days. I moved through the motions of arranging the funeral, greeting distant relatives, accepting condolences. Tom was there, a silent presence at my side, but I felt more alone than ever. It wasn't until after the funeral, sitting in my father's lawyer's office, that I began to surface from my fog of grief. "Andrea," the lawyer said gently, "your father left you his house. Everything is in order, the property is yours free and clear." I blinked, struggling to process this information. The house, my childhood home, filled with memories of happier times. I hadn't even thought about what would happen to it. As we left the lawyer's office, Tom spoke up for the first time. "This is great, Andrea. Think of all the space we'll have. We could throw some amazing parties." I tuned him out, my mind whirling. The house represented both a gift and a burden. It was too big for just the two of us, and the thought of the upkeep was daunting. But I couldn't bear the thought of selling it either. Every room held echoes of my father's laughter, his encouragement, his love. "I think we should rent it out," I said abruptly, cutting off Tom's excited chatter about remodeling plans. Tom's face fell. "Rent it out? But Andrea, think of the opportunities." "I have thought about it," I interrupted. "This is what I want to do. It's my house, Tom." He sulked for days after that, but I stood firm. I found a reputable rental agency and signed a contract with them. It felt like the right decision, giving me time to grieve and consider my options without making any rash choices. A week later, I received a call from the agency that left me bewildered. They informed me that they couldn't access the property. Apparently, some tenants were occupying the house and refusing to let them in. I was shocked. Who could these people be? How did they get into my father's house? A mix of confusion and anger swirled inside me as I grabbed my car keys. I had to see this for myself. As I pulled up to my father's house, my heart was pounding. The familiar sight of the old Victorian-style home, with its wraparound porch and faded blue paint, brought a rush of memories. But those nostalgic feelings were quickly overshadowed by my growing anger and confusion. I marched up to the front door and knocked forcefully. "Hello?" I called out. "This is my property. I demand to know who's in there." The door creaked open, and I found myself face to face with my mother-in-law, Evelyn, flanked by her daughter Sarah and Sarah's children. "Andrea, dear," Evelyn exclaimed, her voice sickly sweet. "What a surprise to see you here." I struggled to find words, my mouth opening and closing silently before I finally managed to speak. What are you doing here? How did you get in?" Evelyn's smile didn't falter. "Oh, Tom gave us the keys. He said we could live here and look after the place. Isn't that thoughtful of him?" My blood began to boil. Without a word, I pulled out my phone and dialed Tom's number. He answered on the third ring. "Hey, what's up?" "Tom," I said, my voice trembling with barely contained rage, "why are your mother and sister living in my father's house?" There was a pause, then a sigh. "Look, Andrea, they needed a place to stay. Their old rental got sold, and they had nowhere to go. I knew the house was empty, so you gave them the keys without asking me?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "Tom, I signed a contract with a rental agency. There are tenants supposed to be moving in." "Andrea, their family," Tom said, his tone growing stern. "They'll live there and look after the place. It's better than having strangers in it." "This is my house, Tom," I said through gritted teeth. "You had no right to make this decision without me. You need to come here right now and sort this out." "I'm busy," he replied curtly. "You're overreacting. Just let them stay." With that, he hung up. I stared at my phone in disbelief, then turned back to Evelyn and Sarah. "This isn't your house, and you have no right to be here. I'm asking you nicely to leave. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." Sarah let out a harsh laugh. "Or what? You'll call the cops on your own family?" I met her gaze steadily. "If I have to, yes." For a moment, we all stood in tense silence. Then, without warning, Evelyn and Sarah burst into laughter. Before I could react, they stepped back and slammed the door in my face. I stood there, stunned, staring at the closed door of my own house. The audacity, the disrespect, it was too much. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone again and dialed 911. When the police arrived, I explained the situation as calmly as I could. To my relief, they understood and took my side. They knocked on the door and, when Evelyn answered, explained that she and her family had no legal right to be there. "Ma'am," one officer said firmly, "this property belongs to Andrea Thompson. You need to vacate the premises immediately." Evelyn's face contorted with anger. She turned to me, her eyes blazing. "You've crossed a line, Andrea," she spat. "You'll regret this, mark my words." As the police continued to insist they leave, Evelyn pulled out her phone. I watched as she dialed and put the phone to her ear. "Tom," she said, her voice suddenly trembling. "You need to come here right now. Your wife has called the police on us. We're not leaving until you get here and teach her some obedience." I watched in disbelief as Tom's car screeched to a halt in front of the house. He'd refused to come when I called, claiming he was too busy, but here he was, rushing to his mother's aid. Tom strode up to the porch, his face a mask of anger. "What's going on here?" he demanded. Evelyn burst into tears at the sight of her son. "Oh, Tom, your wife has called the police on us. We have nowhere to go." I tried to interject, to explain the situation, but Tom held up a hand to silence me. He wrapped his arms around his sobbing mother, shooting me a glare over her shoulder. "It's okay, Mom," he said soothingly. "I won't let you be out on the street. You can all come stay with us in our apartment." I stared at him, shocked. "Tom, you can't be serious. Our apartment is tiny. There's no room." "Well," he cut me off, his voice cold. "Since you don't want to be nice, things are going to have to get uncomfortable. You brought this on yourself, Andrea." And just like that, my life turned into a living hell. Our small apartment wasn't designed to house so many people. Evelyn, Sarah, and Sarah's 3 children moved in, turning our once peaceful home into chaos. The living room became a makeshift bedroom, with air mattresses taking up every inch of floor space. Privacy became a distant memory. The noise was constant. Sarah's children, aged 4, 6, and 8, seemed to be in a competition to see who could scream the loudest. They ran through the apartment like tornadoes, leaving destruction in their wake. One afternoon, I returned from work to find our TV smashed on the floor. The eldest boy had been trying to reach something on top of the entertainment center and had pulled the whole thing down. "Kids will be kids," Sarah shrugged when I confronted her about it. The mess was overwhelming. Toys littered every surface, dirty dishes piled up in the sink, and laundry seemed to multiply overnight. Yet somehow, I was expected to clean it all up. When I protested, Tom would step in. "Come on, Andrea. You're the lady of the house. It's your job to make our guests comfortable." "Guests?" I would sputter. "They've taken over our home." But my protests fell on deaf ears. Tom, Evelyn, and Sarah had formed a united front against me. They criticized my cooking, complained about the cleanliness of the apartment, and made constant demands on my time and energy. I felt like a servant in my own home, constantly cooking, cleaning, and catering to their whims. The dreams of opening my own massage therapy business seemed to be slipping further away with each passing day. 2 months dragged by, each day blending into the next in a blur of exhaustion and frustration. Sleep became a luxury I could rarely afford. Between the constant demands of Tom's family and the noise that seemed to permeate every corner of our small apartment, I found myself constantly on edge, never able to truly relax. One Friday, after a particularly grueling week at work, I reached my breaking point. The thought of returning to the madhouse that was now my home filled me with dread. Without really thinking it through, I decided to stay at my office overnight. The quiet solitude of the empty clinic was a balm to my frayed nerves, and for the first time in months, I slept deeply and peacefully. The next morning, feeling somewhat refreshed, I steeled myself and headed home. As soon as I walked through the door, I knew something was wrong. Tom was waiting for me, his face a mask of fury. "Where the hell have you been?" he demanded, not even giving me a chance to speak. You didn't come home last night. You didn't cook dinner. You've completely abandoned your responsibilities. I tried to explain, to defend myself, but Tom wasn't interested in listening. I've had enough, he spat. You're neglectful, disobedient, and clearly don't care about this family. I want a divorce. Before I could process what was happening, Tom thrust a stack of papers into my hands. Divorce papers. Already signed by him. I'll be demanding half of everything, he said coldly. Now get out. I don't want to look at you anymore. With that, he pushed me out of the apartment and slammed the door in my face. I stood there, stunned, clutching the divorce papers and fighting back tears. In a daze, I made my way to my father's lawyer's office. As I explained the situation, the kind old man who had known my family for years listened patiently. Andrea, he said gently when I finished, I want you to take a deep breath and relax. Your soon-to-be ex-husband has no claim on your property. Both the house and the apartment were gifted to you by your father before your marriage. They're yours, free and clear. Relief washed over me, but it was quickly followed by a wave of exhaustion. As I left the lawyer's office, I found myself driving towards my father's house, my house now, I reminded myself. I made my way to my father's study, a room that had always been a sanctuary of sorts. As I began to sort through the papers on his desk, a sealed envelope caught my eye. It was addressed to me, in my father's familiar handwriting. With trembling hands, I opened the letter and began to read. My dearest Andrea. If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you. I want you to know how proud I am of the woman you've become. You've always had such drive, such passion for your work. I've watched you pour your heart and soul into your dream of owning your own massage therapy business. I'm writing this to tell you to follow your heart, Andrea. Trust yourself. You have the skills, the determination, and the compassion to make your dream a reality. To help you on your way, I want you to sell this house. Use the money to open that salon you've always talked about. I know it might be hard to let go of this place and all the memories it holds, but I want you to create new memories, new successes. Remember, I will always be with you, cheering you on. Go make your dreams come true, my darling daughter. All my love. Dad. Tears streamed down my face as I finished reading. Even now, months after his passing, my father was still supporting me, still believing in me. With renewed energy, I picked up the divorce papers Tom had thrust at me. Without hesitation, I signed my name next to his. This chapter of my life was over, and I was ready to start a new one. The next morning, I marched into the mayor's office and filed the divorce papers. As I walked out, I felt as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I was free. My next stop was my realtor friend, Sarah's office. Within weeks, both my father's house and the apartment were sold. The proceeds were more than I had dared to hope for. With Sarah's help, I found the perfect space for my massage parlor, a large, airy room in a bustling part of town. I poured my heart into transforming it, choosing soothing colors and comfortable furnishings. Every piece of equipment I purchased felt like a step closer to my dream. My final task was finding a new place to live. I fell in love with a small, cozy apartment just a few blocks from my new salon. It was perfect, a fresh start, close to my new business. As I was moving my things into my new apartment, I received a frantic call from my former neighbor. New tenants had shown up at my old apartment, much to the shock of Tom and his family. I couldn't help but smile as I imagined their confusion and panic as they scrambled to pack up and leave. It wasn't long before my phone rang again. This time, it was Tom. Andrea, what's going on? He demanded. Why are there strangers in our apartment? And why did I get a notice from the mayor's office about our divorce being finalized? I took a deep breath. It's not our apartment anymore, Tom. I sold it. And yes, the divorce is final. This is what you wanted, remember? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Tom spoke again, his voice had softened. Andrea, I was just joking about the divorce. I love you. We can work this out. I'll tell Mom and Sarah to move out. Please, just come home. No, Tom, I said firmly. This isn't about your mother or sister anymore. This is about us. You've shown me exactly who you are and what you think of me. I deserve better than that. With that, I hung up and blocked his number. As I looked around my new apartment, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. This was my space, my life, on my terms. A year has passed since I took that leap of faith and opened my own massage therapy salon. As I stand in the reception area, watching clients come and go, I can hardly believe how much has changed. My little salon has flourished beyond my wildest dreams. Word of mouth spread quickly about the quality of our treatments, and soon we were the talk of the town. My appointment book, once filled with blank spaces and hope, is now packed solid for months in advance. I've had to hire 3 additional therapists to keep up with demand. As I watch them work, guiding clients through their treatments with skill and compassion, I feel a surge of pride. This is what I've built, what I've nurtured. It's more than just a business, it's a place of healing, of renewal. Financially, I'm more secure than I've ever been. The constant stress of pinching pennies and sacrificing my own needs for others is a distant memory. I can afford to pay myself and my staff well, invest in top-quality equipment, and even set aside a healthy chunk for savings and future expansion. But more than the financial success, it's the freedom that I cherish most. The freedom to make my own decisions, to shape my business and my life according to my own vision. No more compromising my dreams to appease others. No more putting my own needs last. I've heard through the grapevine about Tom and his family. Apparently, they're all crammed into a rented apartment across town. The reports aren't pretty: constant bickering, financial struggles, and a general air of misery. Part of me feels a twinge of sympathy, remembering the good times Tom and I once shared. But then I remember how he treated me, how he allowed his family to steamroll over my needs and dreams, and the sympathy fades. As I enter my apartment, I'm greeted by blessed silence. No screaming children, no demanding in-laws, no sulking husband. Just peace, and the freedom to spend my evening however I choose. My phone buzzes with a text from Lisa, my assistant, a last-minute booking request from a client in pain. Without hesitation, I tell her to schedule them in. This is why I do what I do: to help, to heal, to make a difference. As I head to bed that night, I pass by the photo of my father on my nightstand. His proud smile seems to glow in the dim light. "We did it, Dad," I whisper, touching the frame gently. "We really did it." I fall asleep with a smile on my face, excited for what tomorrow will bring. This is the life I've always dreamed of: challenging, fulfilling, and entirely my own. And I wouldn't have it any other way. My name is Lillian, and if you'd told me a few years ago that my life would flip upside down after one party, I'd have laughed. But that's exactly what happened the night I met Jack at my college graduation party. I was there with friends, just trying to celebrate our freedom from exams and papers, not expecting my entire future to show up. "Hey, Lillian, you gotta meet this guy." My friend Liz pulled up my arm, her eyes twinkling with something I couldn't quite place. "Who is it?" I asked, scanning the crowd for any sign of trouble. "Just a friend of Tom's. He's seen your photos and won't shut up about meeting you," she said as she dragged me through the crowd. We stopped in front of a tall guy with a cheeky grin. "Lillian, meet Jack." "Jack, this is the girl I was telling you about." Jack's smile didn't falter. "Heard a lot about you. All good things, I promise," he said, offering me a hand that felt sure and warm. Something about his upfront manner made me laugh. We chatted more, the conversation easy, flowing naturally. Jack was a manager at a local restaurant, a family business he was proud of. He listened intently, his eyes not wandering off like most would in such settings. By the end of the night, he'd asked me out officially. I said yes without a second thought. Our whirlwind romance was the kind you read about in a rushed summer novel. Within months, we were talking about forever. It was fast, sure, but when you know, you just know, At least, that's how I felt with Jack. Marry me. Let's not wait. What's the point? Jack had said one evening, the sunset casting warm glows over his face. Okay, yes. Let's do it, I answered, the simplicity of the moment wrapping around us like a promise. But if I'd thought my spontaneous decision would lead to a fairy tale, reality was ready to wake me up. And it did, right when I met his mother, Susan, for the first time. We arranged to have dinner at their family restaurant, where the clash began. Susan was a stern woman, her hair pulled back tightly, her eyes scanning me like I was a page in a particularly difficult contract. So, Lillian, Jack tells us you're eager to start a family, she said, not as a question, but as an accusation. Yes, we've talked about kids. I've always wanted a big family, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady under her scrutinizing gaze. And you think you're up to it? Bearing healthy children? Her words were as sharp as knives, each one aimed carefully to cut. I bit my tongue to keep from snapping back. Instead, I forced a smile. I understand the concern, but I assure you, I'm more than capable of contributing to the family, in all ways. The dinner passed with heavy air and harder words. Jack was quiet, his usual vibrant self dimmed by his mother's overbearing presence. I left feeling not just evaluated but reduced to a mere function in their family plan. Starting a new job is tough, but when that job is at your in-law's family restaurant and your boss is your mother-in-law, it's a whole different ballgame. From my first day, Susan made it clear I was there to work, not to be pampered, because I was the boss's son's wife. I showed up early, dressed in the uniform that was a bit too big and smelled faintly of fry oil from previous wearers. Susan was already there, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the restaurant like a hawk. You're early, good. We start you off with cleaning. Every good employee knows the place from scrubbed toilets to polished silver, she declared without a greeting. I nodded, taking the bucket and cloth she shoved into my hands. Where should I start? Bathrooms, then move to the dining area. After that, help in the kitchen. We'll see if you can handle simple tasks before we put you anywhere near customers, Susan instructed, her tone leaving no room for argument. Lunch rush brought a new kind of chaos. Susan stationed me at the dish station, a clear view of the entire operation, but none of the glory. Jack came in to check on the front, barely acknowledging my presence as he discussed orders with the chefs. Hey, babe, need any help? I managed to catch him during a brief lull. Jack glanced at his mother, then back at me. Keep at it. You're doing fine. Fine doesn't feel quite right from here, I shot back, a little stung by his dismissiveness. Jack's face tightened, a look I was coming to know meant he was stuck between me and his mother. She thinks it's good for everyone to start at the bottom. Prove yourself, and she'll ease up. Promise. The promise felt hollow as I watched him walk away, back to laughing and chatting easily with the other staff. Meanwhile, I was left with prune hands and a sour taste in my mouth, wondering how long this proving myself would take. One particularly busy evening, as I was setting up for a big party, Susan cornered me in the pantry. Lillian, the napkins are folded wrong. Do them again. And make sure the table settings are perfect. Our reputation is not up for debate because you can't follow simple instructions. I clenched my jaw, refolding the napkins. I did them exactly as you showed me. Susan snatched one up, refolding it with sharp, practiced flicks. Like this. Pay attention. I won't have my son married to someone who can't manage basic tasks. Her words stung, and I fought back the urge to snap. Instead, I focused on the napkins, each fold a reminder that I was more than she saw. It was just another hectic lunch rush at the restaurant when it hit me, a wave of dizziness so strong I had to grip the edge of the kitchen counter to keep from falling. I need a minute, I muttered to no one in particular, easing myself into the back room where the noise dulled to a dull roar. Once I was sure I wouldn't just keel over, I grabbed my purse and headed to Jack, who was busy at the cash register. Jack, I'm not feeling right, can I go home? He looked up, concern immediately crinkling his brow. Yeah, of course. Take it easy, okay? Want me to come with? I shook my head. I'll be fine. Just need to rest. At home, the quiet was a relief, but my mind raced. This wasn't just fatigue or stress. On a hunch, I found an old pregnancy test in the bathroom cabinet. Waiting for the result, my heart pounded not just with hope, but a flicker of fear. Positive. The word seemed to leap out at me. I was pregnant. I couldn't wait to tell Jack. When he came home, his face lit up like the 4th of July. Really? That's incredible, Lil. His excitement was a bomb, making everything feel just right. But the good news quickly turned my life at the restaurant upside down. Susan, ever the overseer, took the pregnancy as her new project. My workload was cut down, which I appreciated, but that came with her scrutinizing every bite I ate. No soda, Lillian. Here, have some water. You need to stay hydrated for the baby, she would chide, pushing a glass towards me as if I were a child. She even tagged along to my antenatal checkups. Standing next to the doctor like she was part of the medical team, she'd ask, "Is she eating right? Are the baby's measurements normal?" The doctor, used to nervous grandparents, reassured her, but Susan's vigilance only intensified. "We just need to be sure everything is perfect," she'd say, making me feel less like a soon-to-be mom and more like a walking incubator. Even Jack started echoing his mother, his words and ways morphing into a version of Susan. "Mom's right, you know. We just want what's best for the baby," he'd tell me when I expressed frustration. When our son was born, I thought maybe things would get better, that Susan and Jack's fixation would ease up now that the baby was here, healthy and perfect. But it only shifted gears. They doted on him to an extreme, hanging on his every gurgle and fuss, while I was nudged to the side, my role seemingly fulfilled. As they spoiled him with endless toys and attention, I tried to set boundaries, only to be overridden. "He's our heir, Lillian. He deserves the best." Jack would dismiss my concerns, parroting his mother's justifications. Feeling increasingly isolated, I poured myself back into work at the restaurant, where Susan's grip seemed to tighten. "Good, now that you've had the baby, you can focus here again. We need all hands on deck," she told me, as if my maternity leave was just a brief hiatus. It hurt, feeling reduced to just a role I could play in their plans, mother to the heir, worker in the family business. But I swallowed the pain, focusing on my son, determined to give him the love and balance his father and grandmother seemed to forget. The joy of finding out I was pregnant again was unlike the first time. This time, both Jack and Susan were equally thrilled, hoping for another heir who could one day help run the family restaurant. Everything felt like it was falling into place. "Ethan's going to be a big brother," Jack said, smiling as he watched Ethan play. "He'll have someone to teach all his tricks to." Susan was more practical, but no less excited. Another strong boy in the family would be perfect. Let's hope for a smooth pregnancy. Things changed when my second son, Jamie, was born. He was a large baby, robust and seemingly healthy, but as months passed, it was clear he wasn't developing like Ethan had. He was slower to reach milestones such as talking and walking. Concerned, I took him to see several specialists. After numerous tests and consultations, the diagnosis was clear: Jamie had developmental delays. The specialists were optimistic, though. With regular therapy and support, Jamie can still lead a normal life, one of them assured me. He's not less, just different, and he needs your support. I clung to that hope, but Jack and Susan reacted differently. "This doesn't make sense," Jack muttered after one appointment. "He doesn't even look like Ethan did at that age." Susan was more blunt, her words cutting deeply. "Are you sure he's even Jack's son? He doesn't look like anyone in our family." I was stunned. "What are you saying, Susan? Of course, he's Jack's. How can you even suggest such a thing?" Their skepticism grew into something uglier. Jack's warmth toward Jamie cooled, and Susan outright suggested we minimize spending on Jamie's therapies. "Why waste money on something that's not even certain? He's not going to be what we hoped," she said coldly one evening as we discussed finances. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He's your grandson, I countered, my voice shaky with anger. He needs us, and I'm not going to let him down. Susan's response was even more shocking. Maybe it would be best if he were placed in a facility that can handle his kind. I felt as though she had slapped me. That's not an option. He's my son, our son, and he stays with his family. Despite the lack of support, I devoted myself to Jamie's development, spending every penny I could save on therapies and special classes. It was exhausting and expensive, but watching Jamie make progress, no matter how small, was worth every sacrifice. Ethan, bless his heart, became Jamie's protector and biggest cheerleader. Look, Jamie can almost write his name. Ethan would proudly show off Jamie's scribbles to anyone who would look. He's doing great, thanks to you helping him so much. I would tell Ethan, grateful for his maturity and kindness, qualities that seemed scarce in our home. As years slipped by, Oliver's journey with his specialists began to bear fruit. His intellect nearly caught up with his peers, a milestone that filled my heart with pride. Physically, he was a powerhouse, his strength eclipsing the more delicate build of his older brother, Ethan, who had since moved to college in another city. Keep up the good work, bro, Ethan had told Oliver, hugging him tightly before he left. Hit those books hard, just like I did. Oliver took his brother's words to heart, balancing his studies diligently. However, it wasn't just the books that caught Oliver's attention, but the allure of the baseball field. His physical prowess hadn't gone unnoticed. The high school baseball coach saw him during gym class and immediately saw potential. You've got a strong arm there, Oliver. Ever thought of playing baseball seriously? He had asked, an encouraging smile on his face. I remember feeling a surge of hope when Oliver shared the news. Sports could be another piece of his rehabilitation, a way to build confidence, teamwork skills, and physical health. However, when Jack learned of this, his reaction was as cold as a winter squall. Baseball? That's the last thing he needs. He's going to work in the restaurant, we need a maintenance worker. That's his future, not playing some pointless game, he declared one evening after dinner, his tone brooking no argument. Susan, ever his echo, added her own harsh words. And he's hardly got the brains for sports. He needs to focus on simple, practical work. It's all he's suited for. But Oliver's crushed look that evening settled it for me. I wasn't going to let Jack's or Susan's narrow views stifle my son's potential. I met with the coach the next day, explaining the situation. I want Oliver to play. He needs this. Can we keep it just between us? Coach Thompson nodded, understanding flashing in his eyes. We'll make it work. He can come to the early morning sessions before school and I'll keep him off the game roster for now. Let's just get him playing, get him involved. So, we started our little conspiracy. I bought Oliver a uniform, hiding it in an old backpack I found in the attic. You're doing something good, Mom. Thanks for standing up for me, Oliver whispered one morning as he geared up for his first secret practice. Oliver thrived. With each practice, I saw more of the joy that sports brought him, how it transformed him, how his teammates accepted and cheered for him, how he laughed and high-fived after a good play. It was a world apart from the stifling air of the restaurant, a breath of fresh freedom that Oliver deserved. The day everything fell apart started just like any other at the restaurant. I was in the front, dealing with the lunchtime rush, when I realized we were low on napkins. Heading to the back room to grab another pack, I stumbled upon a scene that stopped me dead in my tracks. There was Oliver, struggling under the weight of a beer keg, his face red with effort. Jack was there, overseeing the work with a cold detachment that made my blood boil. Oliver, put that down right now. I screamed, my heart pounding with fear and anger. Jack turned to me, annoyance flickering across his face. He's fine, Lillian. He needs to learn what real work is. Real work? He's just a kid, Jack. And those kegs are way too heavy for him. I shot back, rushing over to help Oliver set the keg down safely. Jack scoffed, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. He's strong, stronger than he is smart. That's all he's good for, manual labor. His words sliced through me, but before I could respond, he added, "Besides, it's not like he's my own son. For all I know, you had him with someone else." I stared at him, stunned into silence for a moment. "What did you just say?" My voice was low, dangerous. "You heard me. No ancestors of mine would be as dumb as him," Jack sneered, turning back to oversee the rest of the unloading. Tears of rage blurred my vision, but I wiped them away quickly. "After school, Oliver is going to college, just like Ethan. He's your son, Jack, and he deserves your support, not your insults." At that moment, Susan walked in, her timing as impeccable as ever. Catching the tail end of our conversation, she laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "College? Him? Don't be stupid, Lillian. He's retarded, all he's good for is carrying kegs of beer." I left them in the storeroom, their laughter echoing in my ears as I drove straight to the clinic to request the DNA test results I'd secretly had done weeks ago, unable to bear the gnawing doubt Jack had planted. When I returned with the envelope, my hands trembled as I handed it to Jack. "Read it," I demanded. His smugness faltered as he tore it open, his eyes scanning the contents. His face went white as he read the conclusion: Oliver was indeed his biological son. Susan peered over his shoulder, her face contorting with disbelief. "This doesn't change anything. There's no stupidity in our family. He's not going to college." Jack's response was cruel, dismissive. "He's not getting a dime from me for college. He's more used to us here." Something inside me broke then. I couldn't bear the thought of my son suffering any more under their disdain. "I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce," I said, the words tasting of freedom and fear. Jack's reply was cold, immediate. "Fine. Pack your things and get out of my house." Packing was a blur, every folded shirt and stuffed toy a nail in the coffin of my marriage. As we drove away, the weight of years of disdain and struggle seemed to lift slightly. We arrived in the city where Ethan was at college. He had rented a small apartment off campus, and when I called him about our situation, he didn't hesitate. "Stay with me, Mom. There's not a lot of space, but we'll make it work." Seeing Ethan again lifted our spirits. He opened the door, and pulling us both into a hug, he said, "Whatever you need, I'm here." Job hunting was next. I pounded the pavement, handed out resumes, and finally landed a job at a local restaurant. It wasn't anything fancy, but the owner, Mike, was understanding and supportive. "I heard about your situation, Lillian. You start whenever you're ready," he told me on my first day. Oliver started at a new school and joined the baseball team immediately. Watching him put on his new uniform, I felt a swell of pride. He was smiling again, his confidence returning. Life had settled into a new, happier rhythm. Oliver was growing into a fine young man, excelling in school and on the baseball field. His dedication and natural talent eventually caught the eyes of scouts, and by the time he graduated from high school, he had an offer that would change his life forever. He came home one afternoon, a broad smile plastered across his face, waving a letter in the air. "Mom, you won't believe it," he exclaimed, barely able to keep still. "What is it, honey?" I asked, wiping my hands on a kitchen towel as I turned from the stove. "I got it, Mom. The contract from the Phoenix Bats, remember, the big league baseball team? They want me to join them." His eyes sparkled with excitement and disbelief. I felt a rush of emotions, from joy to overwhelming pride. "Oh, Oliver, that's wonderful. I knew you could do it." I pulled him into a tight hug, feeling his heart racing with excitement. "Yeah, they want me to start training with them next month. I'll be traveling a lot, to different cities, playing against the best of the best," he explained, his voice tinged with a nervous energy. As Oliver traveled and competed, I watched every game I could on TV, often alone in the quiet of the living room after a long day at the restaurant. Each game he played was a testament to his resilience and determination. Meanwhile, Ethan was carving out his own path with remarkable success. After graduating from college with honors, he landed a job at a leading mobile application company. Within a year, he was leading projects and making a name for himself in the tech industry. As for me, life had taken a turn for the better in more ways than one. I continued to work at the restaurant where Mike, my boss, had been a constant source of support and kindness. Over time, our relationship grew into something deeper. We married quietly in a small ceremony attended by Ethan, Oliver, and a few close friends. "Lillian, you've made me the happiest man," Mike said during our wedding, his eyes shining with love and sincerity. Under Mike's encouragement, I took on more responsibilities at the restaurant, eventually becoming the manager. My days were long and often challenging, but fulfilling. I had a purpose, a supportive family, and a partner who stood by me. The day was filled with excitement and a bit of nervous energy. My youngest son, Oliver, had called weeks ago to tell us his baseball team was playing right here in our city. "You have to come, Mom. It's a big game," he had said, his voice bubbling with enthusiasm. Mike, Ethan, and I arrived at the stadium, the stands buzzing with anticipation. We found our seats just as the game was starting, and the energy from the crowd was electric. Oliver was on fire that day, his pitches clean and strong. The game was tight, but in the end, Oliver's team clinched the win thanks to his record-breaking throw. It was the strongest throw in the history of the team, and the crowd went wild, standing and cheering as Oliver was congratulated by his teammates and coaches. As the applause continued, a disturbance at the edge of the field caught everyone's attention. An elderly bald man and an older woman made their way onto the field, the former waving some papers in the air. The camera panned to them, their images appearing on the big screen. It was Jack and Susan. "That's our boy, our blood," Jack shouted as he tried to reach Oliver. Oliver stopped and stared at them, then took a step back as Jack reached out to hug him. Oliver's voice was firm and carried over the microphone. "No, you are not my dad. My family is my mom, my brother, and Mike, whom I love." The audience burst into applause, supporting Oliver's stand. Susan, never one to give up easily, started yelling, "We want your money. You owe us." Oliver shook his head, resolute. "I owe you nothing. You were never there for me when I needed you." Security quickly intervened, escorting Jack and Susan off the field while the crowd cheered Oliver's bravery and honesty. As we prepared to leave the stadium, Jack and Susan, having been ejected, were waiting by the gate. "The restaurant's gone under. We need help, Lillian," Jack pleaded, desperation in his voice. "No, Jack. It's over. You made your choices," I replied, feeling Ethan's hand squeeze my shoulder in support. Jack's face turned red with anger, and he stepped towards me, but Mike stepped in front of me protectively. "You need to leave and stay out of their lives," he said firmly. Jack hesitated, glanced at the security nearby, and finally backed down. Susan, defeated, followed him. As we walked away, Ethan hugged me tight. "You okay, Mom?" "Yes, honey, I'm fine," I assured him, taking a moment to look back at Oliver, who was signing autographs for young fans, his smile bright and free. "And I realized that I'm the happy person,